From Acres USA, you are listening to the Acres USA podcast, a conversational podcast where we'll explore sustainable farming, regenerative practices, and the latest innovations in eco-agriculture with some of your favorite farmers and ranchers. I'm your host, Taylor Henry, the owner and CEO of Acres USA. Welcome to the Acres USA podcast.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the first workshop of the 1996 Acres USA Conference. Speaking with Gary Zimmer in the hall a bit ago, he said this is where we pour some concrete. This is the foundation, kind of an overview course on the tools and techniques of biological agriculture. There's probably nobody better suited to present this course than Gary Zimmer. He's a farmer, a teacher, a consultant, and he speaks widely throughout the upper Midwest and beyond. He's going to take the form of the lecture today is going to be a case report building a complete farm plan with some property that he knows very well, his own organic farm. So please join me in welcoming Gary Zimmer.
A pleasure to be here again. Can everybody hear me back there? Otherwise I can turn the volume up just a little bit, but that's good. This is a workshop, so I will have this coat off within just a couple of minutes. And it is a pleasure to be here. I was here 2 years ago, I believe, and I had a 45-minute session, and I told Fred, I said, 45 minutes, I need time. I usually do 4-hour workshops is what I got to get to something. And so I was glad to have a workshop today. How many heard me here 2 years ago when I was here? Some of you? People were here then? Some of you, a lot of you are new. How many in here are not farmers? You're curious people? You're competition? No, we have no we have no magic and no secrets out here. I know you're from scattered all over the countryside.
Farm boys at heart.
Farm boys at heart. That is a difficult thing. I guess I was raised on a dairy farm in Wisconsin, and actually I'm a dairy nutritionist by training, and I guess you got to realize that we're going to talk about soils today, and the reason what that's all about is that you can't hardly do dairy cattle without someday getting to the soils. When I first started out in dairy nutrition, I had no idea that what you put on the soil would get in the plant and affect the plant. Nobody ever told me that. And if you want to make that better or worse, you got to start with the soil if you want to change feed. I really got my introduction to what I call biological farming in the mid-1970s. I was teaching at a vocational school in southeastern Minnesota, a farm operation and management course, and I didn't know anything about soils, and so I had the students bring in outside speakers, and guess Brookside Consultant came in to speak, and for some of my students afterwards said, what did you think about what he had to say? And I said, I have never heard anything like that. That guy must be nuts. I don't know what he's talking about. And so I started reading and studying and searching and digging, and that was in the mid-1970s, and I became a Brookside consultant for a few years and traveled this countryside and then moved into Wisconsin and started Midwestern BioAg with a few partners. And we presently work with around 3,000 farms of all different kinds and sizes. Everybody says, well, do you work with cherry trees? And someone like a year ago, someone said, you work with strawberries? I said, are those little round red things? And they did kind of lose a little confidence, but I actually spoke at the Minnesota Strawberry Growers Conference last year because I said, I don't know anything about strawberries. I've never really grown a strawberry, except we're going to start in April. We're going to go through your whole growing season. I want to know what you do, how you manage your farm, what you put on your soils, how you treat your crop, and by the end of the day, I think I can give you some ideas to improve your program. There's limiting factors you have out here, and so that's how we generally approach things. So today I want to have this real practical. I guess I also was quite an honor to be one of the first one here actually with the speaking. I don't believe there's anybody speaking at this moment besides me. I think at 3 o'clock somebody else starts over there. So I get to lay the groundwork. I've been walking around out there at the exhibits. Of course, we have a booth also, but I think they all got the answer. Now, which one are you going to take home? Now, the question is, all those products and all those stories, they probably work for somebody somewhere, but are you sure they're what you need? And that's the question, and I guess if you come here, you got to learn to dig and sort. You got to figure out what you need. You can be sold a lot of things. You got to decide what you need that'll fit you, and maybe you don't need anything. Maybe you don't, maybe everything is working ideal, and that's what we're really going to talk about. I got all my props and all my gimmicks up here because I've been a teacher for a long time, and I put on a lot of winter meetings, and it seems kind of interesting because usually I get the slot right after lunch. They must figure that way. They won't hear what I said. They'll fall asleep. So I got to have a lot of gadgetry to keep you going, see. What I really did is, and I'm going to give my approach is going to be is to hopefully give you some base and some background so you can make good decisions on buying things. It's really quite that simple. And so I got to start out with some base information. I don't know what your backgrounds are. There are a number of you are farmers. A whole bunch of you are, obviously, and a whole bunch of you are not. If I was really going to sit down one-to-one, I would start asking you questions. What kind of farm you do? What kind of crops you grow? What kind of things you do? I can't. So don't take what I say up here on my farm and take that formula to your farm because you're making a mistake. And if something works for me and I get all excited about a product, I probably missed the big picture. And I got to look at where that fits in. Because I've been accused of speaking at 250 words a minute with gust up to 500, I made this on a handout. 3 hours is still time limiting for me, see? And if one of you nod off and you think, if I'm speeding up, look around. The guy next to you is nodding off. Wake him up because I saw it. And I'm trying to get him going again, see? So anyway, the handout. So if you miss some of these things, actually, this is, I'm writing a book, and I'm trying to make it a practical book. I know there's a lot of books already in the world, and I know a lot of guys don't gain things from books. It's really, we have about 75 consultants that work for us, and it's really a training manual for our consultants. And I said, originally it was a consultant training manual. I said, I have no secrets. If a farmer wants to learn this and he wants to study this, that's fine. We're making it open and available. This is some chapters and some excerpts from that book. It's certainly not completed, but it's on the way, and it's meant to be a practical kind of thing. So for the first hour here, I will go through and do some groundwork and lay what biological farming is and give you some food for thought. Then we'll get into some slides. I want to show you some slides about some actual things out here. And in the last hour, now those slides will set it up for this case study I'm going to do. I don't know how better way to talk about putting together a working program, but by example. I don't know how better way to show biological or organic agriculture, but by example. That's why I farm. I started about 4 years ago, bought my first farm, and everybody says, why do you farm? And I said, because I didn't get enough child abuse as a kid, and this is my whole thing. No, some days that's exactly what it is, I can guarantee you. So I farm because of, I think you got to have a touch with reality. I think you got to be out there. I was born and raised on a farm. I want my connections to it. And the other thing, 3 years ago, we bought another farm. My son was 16 years old when he bought his first farm. And I said, there was hope for you to get it paid for in his lifetime. But being 16 years old and he got that farm, we got that one certified organic. I said to him, you got two choices. You can farm Iowa County, which I live in southwestern Wisconsin, or you can farm specialty. Now, I said organic agriculture is, all these people have this concept of organic agriculture. Actually, I'll show you some of my slides, some of the things we're doing as we go along, and I got some goals and some plans. I want to enter my organic farm in the National Corn Growing Contest. I'm tired of a little book out here that says plastics and pesticides are necessary to survive in this world, otherwise we have a shortage of food. I'll go up against anybody anywhere. There's no rule in the organic book that says I have to starve my crop of nutrients. Did you realize that? If I don't starve it of nutrients, how can I suppress the yields? I suppose I could go out there deliberately. But if you get that thing ideal, and you get that soil healthy, and you get that soil balanced, you can't stop it from producing. And I don't care if you call it organic or not. The only challenge with organic might be, what? Weed control? It's 1996. We got technology. We got tools. I don't see that as a problem. I brought some soil in today, and later on you guys can take a look. Oh, by the way, those handouts, there were more of them up here if they ran short back there, you guys. Have you got them back there? Yeah, the guys handing them out there are a couple of our smiling consultants scattered on this countryside that we bring here for education. I brought this soil in. It's kind of interesting. I went and dug this 2 days ago. It was 4 degrees on my farm. And you said, now, how in the world did you dig that soil? I was going to bring a comparison in of a good biological soil. This side represents a biological soil. This side represents just what it says, a dead soil. So I was going to bring a dead soil in. I didn't have a big enough pick. I couldn't get any. I went down in my bottoms. This is an interesting kind of story. I took my shovel, and how much soil do you want, and where would you like it delivered? Now, the top was frozen, and I flipped up big hunks. But this is what's underneath. Now, I will show you the soil test on this land, and I'll show you some other things about this land. You cannot, from a soil test, you would never know what this is. I had some beautiful slides on the crop that was growing, and fortunately, I don't know where they are. Unfortunately, I don't know where. We were at Farm Progress Days, and I somehow got them lost. But I guess what I want to point out is that this is a healthy, loose, crumbly soil, and I'm standing down there, and I said it was an opportunity of a lifetime. Everybody that farms ought to either take a small segment of land and do whatever they think is right and essential and necessary that they can afford to do it on. 5 acres. Or you ought to start with a virgin piece of land. You know, they said the pioneers moved through this countryside and they broke the land, and when they depleted the minerals in the soil, they moved on. And that is a false statement. When they depleted the biology, they moved on. There's no minerals in that soil, and it grows a wonderful crop. Biologically, when they plowed it and they dug it and they digged it and they put all these things on, when the ground got hard and tight, they went and broke up no virgin land again. You don't have virgin land. The challenge is, I got 10 acres of that virgin land down there. It's creek bottom land, and it winds around the creeks, and it's kind of not always easy to farm necessarily, but it hasn't flooded for years, because all in our part of the state, it's recreation people, it's all CRP land, so the watershed runoff is not near what it used to be, so I can farm this land again. But the challenge is to keep it that way. If I destroy that with my farming methods, then we are not gaining any ground. And if I can take now my other land that I got that's already over here, dead, hard, lack of life, lack of biology, lack of organic matter, and if I can move it over here, I've already got gray hair. I'm trying to speed that process up. And if it might take me a long time, but if we can't start with it and keep it, then we better question what we're doing out here in agriculture. So, about time. That's long enough. I'm getting warmed up. So in order to demonstrate this thing, everybody that's in here that's a farmer, are you here? Do you have livestock? How many guys got livestock? Is it essential to have livestock to be biological? Are you here in the middle? Is your soil somewhat better than the guy over here without any livestock? What kind of farmer is this? What kind of soil is this? Do you know of any land exactly like this? In other words, this is a bell curve. In the middle is probably where a lot of people are, a lot of soils are. And out here, there's a few of these guys. We hear these cases, and I only know a handful of these guys. I've been on some of these farms. Those are the ones you hear these fantastic reports about. In 1970, there was a farm in Illinois that was right out there, and he produced 370 bushel of corn in Illinois in 1970s. And he didn't even have Pioneer seed. Can you imagine? His potential was probably far, far greater. It was an FS variety of corn. I can't, wow, I'm just amazed by that. And it was in 36-inch rows. Now everybody's going to 20. Are we confused about something here? What did that crop for him? Was it just because he put on tons of N, P, and K? I know, I'll throw on more anhydrous, more soluble phosphorus, more soluble potash, and I'll go over here. Is that right? Or I go from here back to here. Is that where I'll go? Are livestock necessary? No. I don't want to be critical of livestock. We have those critters too. There's such a surplus of beef. I've been seeing carcasses laying dead in the road all the way around, all the way down here. That's why the price is so low. I assume that's what must be happening. I don't want to get into that. But there's beef prices aren't real good, so I get some beef cattle because I got this creek bottom land. And I look at that and say, how do cattle help my farm? I cut the crop off. I feed it to cattle. They run down to the creek and drink and leave half their manure there. They take the minerals and energy back out. I get a little bit of it because of my management techniques, and I haul that back on the land. How did that help me? They took from me. They didn't give to me. You know what the difference is? The guys out here, the difference is that the livestock sets you up to be a better biological farmer. They force you probably to grow forage crops, and that's your hogs. And then, how many guys out here that are straight grain would consider going out there and spreading shell corn on their land? Or soybeans. Now, I have quite a harvest loss this year on some down beans. I guess I spread some soybeans, but how many would do that? What it is, and when you feed a chicken or a pig, all you're putting on the land is what? Corn and soybeans run through a chicken or a pig. You're putting the grain out there. You're putting what? Some kind of a soluble food for the life in the soil. If you go out here and say, well, look, I don't really, I'll do that just a little bit different. I will go out here and I will specifically farm biologically. I want to give you some ideas that get you somewhere between these two spots. I want to specifically do it. over here, in order to do that, and I want to break soils down into kind of their components, and that's why I wrote these words up here. I don't know if the people in the back can see or not. And if you got some questions or things, this is a workshop, and you can stop me if you're good enough at this. No, you can stop me, and I will certainly try to answer your questions. Like I said, I got into 3 hours. The hour introduction here, then my slides. We'll take a little break, and then I'll do that, putting the actual working program together. I broke the soils down into their 3 components: the biological, the chemical, and the physical properties in the soil. The biological, the chemical, and the physical. If you see this crazy little machine, a couple of years ago I brought this thing here, and we were kind of joking about it. First of all, I didn't know how to represent the physical properties in the soil, so I thought, well, gosh, what physical really is, and now I brought some beans and marbles, and I thought, some of you guys are short of marbles, and you're missing a few beans up here. I got some. And we called this thing a paramagnetic destronifier just because, I mean, I don't know what you want to do. Where does that fit in? Because everyone, what is that thing? I'm a farmer. It came out of the welding shop. And what it is a way of trying to demonstrate this whole thing about yield and soil and how this thing really works. And why, and the potentials we have, and why someone could grow 370 bushel of corn. Did he do it on N, P, and K? Oh, absolutely not. Impossible. If that would be the case, we'd be doing it all over, wouldn't we? It's not the case. So it's not just biological, chemical, and physical. What would you want to add to that? Why not add electromagnetic? Why not? You want to add some more things to that? It is. It's not. I'm not trying to put it in a jar. I'm not trying to define it simply. And that's why when people talk about their farms, I always ask a lot of questions. I'm trying to get clues. As a consultant, as a farmer, you're looking for clues. Where are you at? Where are you at? If you know where you're at, you probably got a good chance to make decisions on trying to move to another spot. If you don't know where you're at, if you don't evaluate where the things are at in the beginning, and if you're out here just looking for somebody to give you an answer standing there, or a product that's going to solve your problems, you're making a terrible mistake. There are probably some real simple things you can do. You notice I did these in red. It usually aggravates or angers people. No, I don't know. And I got the black and dead, dead soil. This has also got chemical, physical, and biological. If you wanted dead soil, what would you do chemically, physically, and biologically to get it? Chemically, I suppose we could put a little anhydrous ammonia on. How would that do? Would that work? Would that start it? Oh, let's throw a little salt out there. That's not a problem. We can get that out there too. Are we on our way? Are we getting where we want to get yet? Well, maybe we ought to put a little DAP out there. Now, what will DAP do? That's diammonium phosphate. Too much soluble fertilizers. What about creating an imbalance? That's all I did. Oh, I got to look at pH, and so I'll probably throw some lime out there, which is the cheapest stuff that doesn't really matter. I'm just doing it to get the pH up there. And so what have I really created in the chemistry field? An imbalance, and I've done some negative things. If the ammonia upsets the biological balance, it gives us too much nitrogen in one shot. It solubilizes humus. Potassium chloride, not only is a salt out here, it's way too soluble. And if I ran a soil test lab and I wanted to measure the amount of calcium and magnesium in your soil, you know what I could use as an extracting solution? Potassium chloride. Street salt. Oh. So these things are clues. If somebody came to me and said, well, I've been dumping on 500 pounds of potassium chloride, and I've been putting on my 200 pounds of DAP, well, that probably isn't going to do them a lot of good, except might burn some roots off, and I knife in 200 units of anhydrous. And I said, well, why don't we try to increase your yield? Let's double that volume next year and see how we do. Oh, no, he says, I think I don't want to do any more of that. So, and I haven't mentioned herbicides and insecticides yet, have I? And I'm going to stay out of those. And you probably should too. Oh. Now the physical. If you want to destroy the physical, I got an 8-wheel drive tractor. And I can put on a plow. Now, there used to be a B John Deere and 214 bottoms when I was a kid. Now that B John Deere can't even pull the rake to the field. But anyway, it certainly can't pull the plow through the field. And so now I got an 8-wheel drive tractor with a plow. Oh, it's raining out. That won't stop me. I got a moldboard plow. Now, some of you guys got a moldboard plow. So this guy doesn't like moldboard plows. A moldboard plow is a double-edged razor blade in the hands of an ape. Now, you don't have to cut yourself, but it has the potential to physically destroy your soil. You can tip it upside down. You can dig it. You can over-aerate it. You can under-aerate it. Well, let's just quit tillage altogether. That'll really help. When things are going bad, that's probably not the thing you want to do. So you got to have in here as a balance between this chemical, physical, and biological. Now the biology. When's the last time we saw an earthworm? Well, I don't know. When last time I paid attention to one? I don't know. My cab with the headphones on, all I heard was rock music. I didn't hear any earthworms. If we look at the soil, does it smell good? Does it have a nice earthy smell? You know what the best clue? If you haven't ever seen or felt or looked at a biological soil, take a look at this and take a smell of it. It's the root cellar. You're in the root cellar. And that's 2 days ago digging. It's dormant this time of the year. So there's all kinds of things. So if I was out on your farm, now if you fit all this description out here, you're at the wrong conference. Should have been to the no-till conference. No, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that. Do you need to till? Do you need to till the ground? Yeah. If I had 25 to 50 earthworms on a cubic foot and I got that loose, crumbly ground, you can't even get stuck out there. I have to work to destroy that soil. Why would I till it if someone's going to do it for me? But if I got that and I'm not tilling it, I'm being crazy. If I've evaluated myself and I'm out here and I say, well, I think not tilling because that guy said he didn't want me to plow, so I'm going to quit my tillage and I'll go better. You know these guys on no-till say, well, I got by those bad first 5 years. Well, why would you take a 5-year hit? Why don't you go out here somewhere where you're at? Let's say you're here and you want to reduce tillage. I'm not opposed to reducing tillage. Tillage is a necessary evil, just like a herbicide and an insecticide is. Insecticides we can get rid of. Herbicides depends on your farm and your situation. We call them necessary evils. Tillage is a necessary evil. You don't necessarily have to do it. But if we're looking at farming biologically, I think there's a spot and a place for it. But I'm trying to get down to 1 pass tillage on an organic farm. Now that's not abusive tillage, and I'm looking at a purpose. I'm not going out there because it's Monday morning. I'm not going out there because my neighbor's already out there tilling. I got a guy in Minnesota, he said, oh yeah, it's kind of fun with a neighbor. He said, the first day it even looks like it's close to go, I go and park my big tractor at the end of the field because then my neighbors all start up. And that's probably that's a reason to go, I guess. Now, so if you're over here in this chemical, physical, and biological, and you got 25 earthworms in a cubic foot, and the ground is like that soil, loose and crumbling, you got an earthworm smell, you got an ideal balance of minerals. You are probably taking a look at balancing soluble to slow release. That ground is loose and crumbly. You probably have not. Are there guys over here that use a moldboard plow? Yes. Yes. But not every year on every acre, I can assure you that. It's just like they can use them once in a while for, let's say we got a vegetative crop to plow down. These guys over here are paying attention to, or by accident, ended up getting this thing to work. Some of it may have been by accident. Just happened to get the right soil. Is everybody's soil allow you to be a biological farmer? No. You got hard clay that's definitely difficult to work. You got some sandy soil without any base to hold minerals. You aren't going to be here, but you can be here. You don't have to be here. See, you can take, what do I want to do if I want to move from this spot? Well, I can switch from this fertilizer. I'm not going to drop my nitrogen. Let's get rid of this chloride, or at least put it in its perspective. Let's balance the minerals. Find out what my limiting factor is. Get a ratio of those minerals. I don't necessarily not want to look at pH, but if I got a low pH, I want to find out what's missing that I need to add. I'm not necessarily going to go out here and plow it or mud it in it or abuse it. I'm going to treat it like a living, live entity. And I can move off that spot with whatever soil I got. But if that's my goal, I can also make that. But be real where you're at. You're not going to find anything at this show that you can buy to get you from here to here in a short period of time without changing some of your practices in management. I will guarantee you that right now. I'd love to see you try it. Keep doing all these things and buy some magic out here and put it on. Let's see how far you go. See, and this is all real, isn't it? And some of those products are absolutely wonderful, and they absolutely work, but you got to also look at your management and your perspective. So what's this all about? Chemical, physical, and biological. And this is why guys can get yields, and this is why this over here represents yields. This is a hay cube. These are good organic tofu soybeans off our organic farm just a couple days ago. I picked them out of the bin. And this over here is a balanced fertilizer. This is the chemical part, the fertilizer. This is the biological part, worms, plastic ones. And like I said, the marbles and the beans, that's the physicals. I wanted to get that loose, crumbly stuff and didn't know how to represent it. If we're over here and we don't have the physical, Going to take it away. We don't have it. That ground is hard and tight and packed. There's not an earthworm in a mile out here. We're going to take it away. My yields dropped. Oh, I want more yield. I got them back. Whoops, I overdid the... It's going to balance itself. Well, that was too much yield because now I put on salts. I got to take more biology and more physical away because I've used the salt and put salts on, and back down my yields go. And at some point, now especially if I use balanced fertility, I can carry it a little bit further. But I constantly keep adding more fertilizer in order to try to get the same pile. This is the pile, and that's the soil. Now, here's why you can grow 370 bushel corn. The genetic potential is far greater, isn't it? So if I take a look at this thing, and I said, all right, now I got this nice, loose, crumbly ground. I really fixed the soil. I've done something about it. I've got just tons of soil life in there. Whoops, I got that in the fertilizer pot, but anyway. And I do have a good balanced fertility. I don't need to add more fertilizer, but boy, I am sure going to get more yield. Oh, well, we're going to get more yield, aren't we? Does that make sense? And that's exactly how it works. That's exactly how it works. That's why I'm convinced I can grow 300 bushel corn in Wisconsin and 100 bushel soybeans. I'm convinced that I can do a whole lot better than guys have been doing. We are not tapped out in our potential. I'm a dairy nutritionist. In 1975, we fed urea, dikel, and trace mineral salt to dairy cows, and we had 15,000 pound herd averages. I can't find a dairy farmer doing that today. We don't have 15,000 pound herd averages. We doubled them. Feeding dikel, trace mineral salt, and urea to cattle is the same thing as doing this to your soil. If you take that cow and you start balancing that nutrition, now what's really interesting about the dairy cattle thing, and I'll show you some slides in a while. I've been spent so many years at the university, so hung up on numbers, that what happened to me is that I thought if you set your feed test in and you calculate out these numbers and you fed the cow according to those numbers, she'd perform accordingly. Once you break the rules, once you change this over here, once you get over here, don't follow the ration balance sheet anymore. Once you get over here, it's not how many pounds of nitrogen does it take to grow a crop of corn. This is not math. How can it be math? I just on our organic farm this year, and I'll show you some pictures of it. I have balanced nutrition out there. We actually have our organic corn ran between, it averaged 166 bushel an acre, between 158 and 185. I got 16 rows. I don't put any compost or any manure on. I thought, well, during the season, it looked like it was going to do less. And it's 6/10 of an acre. When we go to combine and do yield checks, we start at one end of the field. When we get clear across the field, that's a half mile. It's 6/10 of an acre anyway. When we get to the other end, we unload into a cart and we go weigh it. I got scales on the farm, and that 6/10 of an acre was 10 pounds difference with and without manure. I hauled and spread and put all that compost on for 10 pounds of corn. I had 15 units of nitrogen and 170 bushel corn. As this is math, I want someone to come to my farm and explain it to me. Now, we didn't expect that kind of yield. How in the world, did I grow corn without nitrogen? Do I have magic? I did not grow corn without nitrogen. I grew corn with nitrogen. I just didn't buy the nitrogen. That's the difference. It came from someplace, didn't it? How about the biology? How about the balance? How about the algae in the soil? How about the things I put on that ground had some influence over that?
Gary?
Yes.
No, I'm right with you as far as understanding between good soil and live soil, biological soil. My concern, where I live, is that soil may be thin, and it is, because of the sugarcane companies, cotton companies. It's alive, though, with toxicity.
Yes.
And being part of a certified organic, when you talk about your organic farm, you know, to be certified organic, you're speaking of 3 years without the use of any kind of inorganic substance. And also, you're talking about some of these substances, they'll be residual in the soil for 75 years as far as toxicity goes. What would you suggest in a biological control to help amend these soils? Because they call the sugarcane lands grade A lands that are now open to other diversified farmers to come in and, I mean, anything but grade A.
Hey, Eco Farmers. This is Taylor Henry with Acres USA. I hope you enjoy this podcast as much as I enjoy interviewing these folks. If you're serious about regenerative agriculture, I've got an incredible resource you need to check out, the Acres USA membership. You farm in the physical world, and you deserve a physical printed magazine to match. Since 1971, Acres USA magazine has been the leading voice in ecological agriculture, delivering the best insights from regenerative farmers, agronomists, and researchers to help you farm profitably without toxic chemicals. Our membership included physical and digital copies of the magazine each month of the year, which has always been a standard for Acres USA, but we wanted to over-deliver on content. When I acquired this business, I was happy to find that we had years of audio files from presentations at our annual EcoAg conference. And guess what? They were hiding. Well, not anymore. We developed this membership portal that gives you access to the recordings from farmers like Gabe Brown, Gary Zimmer, Joel Salatin, and Mark Shepard. We also include recordings of private events. Finally, if you are like me and you like listening to content, we are now producing a membership-only podcast of each issue of the magazine, so you can consume each article while you're out in the field. To make things even sweeter, you'll get discounts on books, workshops, and events to keep expanding your knowledge. So are you ready to take your farming to the next level? Join today for a ridiculously low price at eco-farming.com or see details in the notes.
I'm totally convinced that the toxicity of the land is a lot easier to heal than the toxic ideas in the minds of men and women. And so that the land will possibly heal faster. Now, I work with a farmer in northern Wisconsin that proved to me, because his ground drains so poorly and has a clay base and it's a blue clay, and he proved to me that it takes twice as much fertilizer as I thought it would to grow the crop he got. And when I suggested he buy a new farm, he took me serious. Now, I'm not suggesting that that's not fixable. I'm suggesting I don't know if I would want that challenge, but I'm convinced. How would you approach it? Biology, microbiology is what's going to clean this earth up. Microbiology is what's going to solve all our toxic problems. Isn't that what they're using out here? That's exactly the truth is. Now, how do you get that microbiology? I'm convinced that the reason they think those toxins will last there a long time in a jar. You put them in a biological system, and I'm not convinced they will if that soil can be begotten to be biology. Now, how would you do that? Would you go out and add more fertilizers? Would you try to grow a crop? We're going to talk about that because that's exactly the approach we're going to have to use. That's why I said to get from there to there, figure out where you're at, it isn't necessarily buying something. Now, you may be able to stimulate that with a biology. We were at the potato show in Wisconsin. I was just amazed. There's a booth at the potato show. We didn't take a picture because I wouldn't have the courage to show it. But on one side, they were selling a fumigant to fumigate the soil. On this half the booth, they were selling an inoculant to inoculate the soil. First, we're going to kill her, and then we're going to start her over again. At $40 a crack to start it and $175 to kill it. Now, I said the farmer that went up there and bought that technology.
Which university did he graduate from?
Not the one of Hard Knocks. So, any other questions on that? And hopefully I'll answer that as we go along and talk about what ways I would see to approach that. And I guess part of the first thing I would do is, like you said, we got these toxins and those things out there, and we got this soil that's been abused. I got my master's degree in Hawaii, so I lived quite a while in Honolulu. I've been on that land. I've been on those farms. I actually had a slide for a while. I guess, like I said, if I thought that I could do something, it's kind of interesting. I don't know how many know Dr. Elaine Ingham. Jim Barlow spoke here a couple of years ago from Oregon. Dr. Elaine Ingham at the University of Oregon is doing work on microbiological soil tests. And in California, I was with her for a while. She was visiting with some people that grew strawberries or raspberries or something, and they took one of the fumigants away, and these people were panicking. And she said, well, send me a soil sample. I will measure the microbiological profile. I'll show you a relationship between biology and fungi, and I'll show you some things about your soil. Send us the samples, and I can give you some guidance. And they sent her a soil sample, and she tested, and she wrote back and said, send me another one. There must be an error in sending. Send me another one, and she calls them back and says, these soils are totally dead. There's no life in the soil. How long do you think it took, and what do you think it took to get that soil biologically active? 1 year, 10 tons of compost per acre, and a green manure crop. That's it. That's it. That's it. 10 tons at $30 a ton, you're saying, oh my goodness, that's $300 an acre. Do you know what it costs to fumigate that stuff? It was cheaper. You know what rent is? So it's all in this perspective out here. So I got saying that that's possible, but I would see there's things we can do. There's things we can do. What we got to do is, what does an ideal biology want? If you're going to say, I want to really take care of this guy out here, I'd stay away from the salts and the ammonias. I'd stay away from the soluble fertilizers. Not that we don't use some soluble fertilizers. We got to balance the soluble to slow release. Do you understand that? all organic farmers do not have in their tool chest, they have no soluble fertilizers, absolutely none. They only have slow release. That's what's limiting with organic farming. Is that soluble fertilizer necessarily bad? A biological farmer can use it. I would love to use it on my organic farm. I always joke about that. I got some livestock. I can take natural mined phosphates, whether it's soft rock or Idaho phosphate. I can dump it in the manure behind my cattle. I can make ammoniated phosphates in the gutter, and I can spread it in my land, and I'm an organic farmer. But I can't go buy any ammoniated phosphates uptown. Now, they're kind of the same when they come out there, but just a little different forms, I guess. But this sources, I don't want too many soluble nutrients in that soil. If you oversaturate that soil with nutrients, and I like to use the word pick on people, but I guess what I'm trying to do is challenge their thinking. If we're going to go out and inoculate a soil with a mycorrhizae, and the only way it does any good is what? Without any soluble nutrients. Go out and dump on a bunch of fertilizer, MAP, DAP, potassium sulfate, potassium chloride, any soluble fertilizer, ammonium sulfate, ammonium nitrate, any soluble fertilizer, and inoculate with a mycorrhizae. And nothing happens. Take your alfalfa or your soybeans, inoculate them with rhizobium organisms, and add a lot of nitrogen to your alfalfa field. How many rhizobium do you get to grow on the roots? Zip. So, you got to look at where we wanted to get. You got to get that balance in this chemistry of nutrients, soluble to slow release. Slow release means something that's released how? The university says, oh, if you add that natural phosphate to your soil, it won't become available in 20 years. Over here, they're absolutely right. And the only way they said it'll become available if you got an acid soil. And they're absolutely right. If you're over here and you add a natural phosphate, I'll guarantee you there's a new ball game. The biology is what makes that available. The microbiology releases those things. If you don't have it, you're right. The phosphates, the natural phosphates don't do you any good as an example. If I want to take care of the soil life, I got to do what? I'm a dairy nutritionist. We're going to feed them. We're going to feed them a balanced diet. We're going to feed them something besides corn stalks and manure, and we're not going to tip them upside down. You see, if I take care of them, what does the soil life want? They want their food on top, and they want to be left alone, and they want a balanced diet. They don't want the toxic, harsh materials. They don't want the awful stuff out there. They don't want to be drived and packed on. You say, wait a minute, how am I going to farm if I don't drive on my land? You see, this is a problem. And we got to get a cat challenger? No. No, you know what that ground right down here is? That creek bottom land, we had, in June, we had enough rain that the only place I could rotary hoe and cultivate was down here in the bottoms, because I couldn't get mud on my tires even. That ground could take it. The water soaked in, and it held up the equipment. But if I want to take care of the soil life, and if I want to do that, first of all, if I want to fix the soil, I'm not going to fix it down here. Where does the fence post rot off? Up on top. We're going to shallow incorporate our residues. We're going to feed that soil life a balanced diet. We're going to make sure all the minerals are there. And we're going to start with what mineral? Calcium, followed by phosphorus if we're going to start fixing that soil. We're not going to ignore any of them. But it's a mistake to go out there. You got $20 an acre to spend. See, I worked with the potato people, and I was kind of amazed. They got a budget that just shocks me. These corn and bean guys, they give us a $20 an acre budget, and then they cheat on the number of acres they gave us. They doubled them. So we really only got $10 an acre, and I'm not going to spend 5 of those $10 on copper and all these little things if I'm missing something major, am I? We got to be realistic about it. If this thing is all fixed and ideally balanced, everybody says, boy, he said, you know, that fertilizer you got there is higher priced. And I said, well, do you ever price out copper compared to salt? Now, I said, it's higher priced, but I said, you got 2 things that work. You got one thing is we're trying to correct the mineral balance in this soil. Your objective as a farmer, and don't ever forget that, is not to have anybody show, oh, I got an ideal soil test. I got an ideal feed test. That's not what you're after. That's not your objective. If you've got what you got in your soil, and that's what we're going to talk about evaluation, now we're going to look at, here's what we got. And now we're going to look at it and say that I want to head that toward a proper balance with the proper use of materials, and I want to feed a balanced diet. Fertilizers have something to do with balance, concentration, and recovery. If I started out there and I got a limited budget, and I can't totally fix that soil, but I can do the first things first. Calcium is going to be number 1 on the list, followed by phosphorus. And if those things are already fixed, I can still come to this crop that's growing, and I could add a concentration of balanced fertilizer. I could add enough copper and zinc and everything else to grow me this crop, even though my soils are still not balanced. with the idea I'm going to head toward balance as my budget allows. I will get a good crop. When I put these roots and this stuff back in the soil, it'll slowly start to head me toward balance. I will show you my soil test on our organic farm and what I put on them to do what I've done. So then if I get a huge big root system under here, I'm building soil structure, I'm building organic matter, I've started down that process. But the biology wants their food on top and they want to be left alone because it's the aerobic guys that are the good guys. When you take it out of an aerobic zone, and if you do a test out, you always got to look at the ratios. You want to talk about ratios. If you're going to get hung up on the ratios of chemistry, of calcium to magnesium to potassium, that also get hung up on the ratios of biology. The fungi to the bacteria to the protozoa. We just sent some samples into Dr. Elaine Ingham on our farms. And we compared them to a neighboring farm. Not that, but he had used anhydrous. Not that he was an awful farm. He wasn't here. He was about here in this ratio. And the other guy we took was about here. So we got one, they're about each side of the peak, and one on each side. What she came back with a report was, I didn't tell her what was what and whose was biological or not. The guy that was closer to biology over here had 5 times higher level of nematodes in his soil than the guy over here did. The guy over here had all parasitic root-eating nematodes, and this guy had none. But he had 5 times more nematodes. This guy had double the protozoa in the soil. And the protozoa eat the bacteria and release the nitrogen, and it's October. Why would you release nitrogen in October? The crop just died. I want nitrogen released in when? July, June, not October. So the ratios, the fungi to bacteria were fairly similar. Now, that was why in Oregon it's kind of interesting. They went out and they clear-cut this land with the opinion that it would grow back into trees again. It didn't work. Why didn't it work? Because they changed the soil ratio from fungi to bacteria. That's why if you grow a tree in your backyard and you go home and you put on 4 buckets of compost and you plant your tree and you think you did it good, you made a terrible mistake. It wanted fungi. Give it some old rotten bark. It didn't want bacteria. Trees want fungi. Forest is a fungi environment. Our cropland's a bacterial environment. So if you're going to play these racial games, let's figure out what they all need. And we don't necessarily need to do that. Good old common sense and logic will take us a long way. Any more questions at this point in time? Yes, sir.
I've planted many trees with compost, and they've all sprung marvelously, and
You did wonderful, huh?
I've been happily ever. So I'm trying to walk on what you're saying. I agree that if you made a compost out of bark of hills, I understand what you're saying on the fungi part, but
Yes. And that is true. I planted.
how is it that you could take compost if it's no good for the tree and do your transplant and have the thing
Yes.
thrive?
If you took the seed and put that in the ground and put that compost there from that oak or whatever, you're going to have trouble. You will have a real poor success ratio on surviving. You have a tree that's got a root mass that you planted in the ground and you put a bunch of compost around and stimulated biology. And the biology, a tree out in the yard is going to have a biological environment. It's not that it can't survive in one on the other. It's just like if I got a high fungi environment in the soil, it does not mean I can't grow corn. It's just that I'm going to have more trouble and it's not going to do its ideal performance. It's not that you can't grow that. But if you started out with your backyard, why didn't the reseeding in Oregon work when they clear cut? Because the little oaks couldn't make it. They didn't get a high enough percent of those things grew. There were spots in there they didn't know. It wasn't bare with oaks. There were oaks and things that grew, but they couldn't compete. It didn't become an oak forest again. It did not. It became something else because it was a different biological balance. But yes, I'm glad you brought that up because that's absolutely right.
What do you think about inoculating stuff? Something may work in Florida, but may not work in Montana because there is different biology.
The question is what may work in Florida with a biological system as compared to work in Oregon may be different because of different environments and different situations. I'll tell you the truth is, and we can go through a lot of those things, I don't think there's enough known to really even state that. I guess I spent quite a bit of time talking to Dr. Ingham and realized that she's working in Oregon. That's the reason why. That's the exact answer what I would give back to that question. That's the reason why if you get at this conference and you have supper with something and he says, oh, I put this stuff on, just a miracle on my farm, what would ever give you the clue it would help you? Where'd you get the clue? He's not lying to you, is he? That guy's not lying to you, but it helped him because he accidentally or by smartness figured out his limiting factor. Is that your limiting factor also? Because you might be in Oregon or Florida or North Carolina and you got sand, and that's why I said, don't take my formula off this sheet and run home and put it on your land. That's my formula, not yours. Get your own formula. Get your own thing. But the base common information that I'm here to deliver today is true for everybody about what we can do to feed the biology in the soil. Now, you may use different crops. When I got out in Oregon, out in Idaho last summer, and I suggested they grow a green manure crop, they all laughed. They said, you're going to pay for the water to do this? This is a desert you're in the middle of. We pump every pound of water. We're not going to grow any more green manure crops. We would spray that to get rid of it with a herbicide. And I said, whoops, well, I guess I'm from Wisconsin. I want a green manure crop out here. So then I said to him, well, all right then, you V-rip it twice. Go ahead. I don't care. You got to do what you got to do. You mechanically got to create your structure. They V-rip it both directions to grow potatoes on an 80% base saturation soils up in Oregon. I've been there. They also wouldn't consider, in Oregon, a biological soil inoculant's an industry standard in Idaho. And in Idaho, humic acid is an industry standard. You go to a co-op or Senex, anybody, they're going to sell you humic acid and a bacteria inoculant because they can't get anything to soak in that ground unless they do. So they're trying to stimulate biology. They're using humic acid to improve that structure, and they're going to go out there and V-rip it twice. Now, a green manure crop would have gone a long ways. But they couldn't do that, see? So I don't want to give a formula for anybody. Any other questions?
Yes, if you clear cut the forest and it turns into a bacteria situation, what would you do to turn it back to the fungi?
I suppose, I don't know. I guess it's got to be shaded again, and it's got to be leaves dropping, and it's got to be bark again. That becomes a fungal situation, according to Dr. Ingham.
So if they clear cut the forest and then mulched all that stuff?
Yes. It would probably become a fungal situation, but the sunlight down in there changes the biology, she said. Because we'd have to almost shade it to some degree. I'm not an expert on that by any means. I guess I shouldn't have got into forestry, I guess, but that was just an example. But yes, I'm not sure about it. I think the sunshine has something to do along with the mulching and the shading. I mean, the shade's got something to do with it. You go out there and make plantings, like he said, those certainly can grow your success ratio on trees and your rapidness of growth. If you can change that to a fungal situation with mulch, you might speed the process up. Once it starts shading over and leaves start going, it'll turn into its environment eventually, won't it? It may not be as fast and ideal. You know, we went to black walnut trees this year, and someone said, do you fertilize black walnut trees? And I said, I didn't know anybody ever did. I didn't know you do that. And it was amazing. We took black walnut trees, and we took them, and we actually put some calcium and some phosphorus and some trace minerals. We took a black walnut tree that was this tall, and 3 years old. In 1 year, he's now that tall. Now, obviously, they take nutrients, too. Now, that's grown out in the middle of a hilly farmland that was in CRP. Was that a fungal soil? No, it was a biological, maybe that mulch from all that grass and things, but we, by nutrients, stimulate that thing to grow, and eventually, of course, it'll go on its own. You wouldn't have thought we'd have had to do that with a tree, but anyway. So you want to take out your handouts we gave out, and I just want to page through some things here. I got about another 10 minutes, and we'll take a little break. And I'll show you some slides. The first thing is just kind of an introduction. It's a chapter introduction. It covers some of the points we did with this evaluation. If you're going to, that's about the fourth or so page in, it says evaluation. How do my soils rate? I give you a guide. I should have numbered the pages, but the numbers of the book, that's page like 58. And I thought if I put page 58 on it, you'd really think I'm crazy. So it's only about page 5, because that's somewhere in the middle of the book. Look at the history of what the soil's been doing. That's why I broke it down to its chemical, physical, and biological. If the history has been liming practices, has it been done? What type of lime did you use? Was liming based on pH or nutrient need? Fertilizer practice. Only fertilize with NPK, the cheapest source. Other fertilizer materials were used, and how? Was nitrogen used? The amount and the sources of nitrogen you used. How much nitrogen you using to grow that crop? Manure or compost, did you have any? If you answer all these questions and send those back to me along with the soil report, I'll have a clue as to where you're at. We're not done yet, though, because now let's look at what type of weed problems you got. You got foxtail and you got velvet leaf. You got a sour, tight, acid soil with poor decomposition. You just told me that, didn't you? You got lamb's quarters and pigweeds. Hey, don't get mad at them. They're your friends. They're telling you your soil's in pretty good shape. And I said, I still can't control them. Insect pressure and species, diseases, weeds, tell us clues. Insects eating up your crops. I guess I work on a potato guy up by Stevens Point, and we got this farm out there, and I said, you're in the middle of potato country, and these guys are spraying every 5 days with a fungicide and an insecticide, and they use a systemic insecticide on the potatoes, put on the spring, and it can last till fall. And I said, how do you do this organically? And he said, they got ideal conditions for all the bugs. They all go over there. And that's probably true. He said, I don't have that many. They're not on mine. See, they set the conditions up, the neighbor did. Physical. What types of tools? Have any subsoil made down? Have you got drainage in that soil? Have you dug down in it with a shovel? Are you getting root development? What are the roots looking like? Are your crops, row crops, do you cultivate? Are there row units or tillage units on the planting? I like this guy says, I went to no-till planting, and his corn planter looks like a tillage tool. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm a kind of believer in this zone or tillage. I am a believer in doing as little as possible and absolutely necessary and for a reason. If I can hang all kinds of things on my planter and I can make an ideal zone for roots to grow in, and if I can till that soil and aerate, and if I can incorporate some materials while I'm planting, why not? Why not? We used to farm this way, and now we're going to farm this way. So what? Maybe that's not a bad idea. You better think about that. I would go to zone tillage and controlled tillage or tillage for a reason long before I'd go to no tillage for no reason. On the tillage thing, on the back of that page there, how many trips do you go over the field? I know this guy said, we grow seed corn and we grow 12 trips a year. Is compaction moisture a concern? Would you drive on a field when it's too wet? Do you drive out there anyway? Don't you even care about it? Do you even look at it? I went to one of the guys I work with. They run 4,000 acres. He grows the best crops with the least amount of fertilizer of any farmer I ever worked with. And what he did was he went to one of Don Schrieffer's meetings, and he said, I walked out there and said, Don, you're absolutely right. There's no more grain carts going to ever be on our fields. We're going to have everything is 16-row wide equipment. Every piece of equipment is the exact same width. And we're done harvesting in the fall. The old DMI tiger paws go in there, and we recreate physically this soil. From that moment on, we only drive in the same spot. And he's a fanatic about that. He has hired people to drive crossways across that tractor. They'll be looking for a new job if they drive across those fields and compact it. He's a fanatic about that and grows the best crops for the least fertilizer of any farmer ever worked. And he doesn't even try to get it biological. He doesn't really understand that. He got away from the salts and ammonias. He doesn't use anhydrous. He cut his herbicides down to $13 an acre. And he doesn't use any insecticides because he rotates his crops. Where is he? Oh, about here. He uses some balanced nutrition. He might even be here because he grows an awfully good crop with a little bit of fertilizer, but he pays a lot of attention to that. So you got to evaluate that. Crop practices. Are residues incorporated in the soil? Are they chopped in small pieces? If you leave the stalks and the residues long, how many sites do you have for the biology to work on? I'd rather chop it up in little pieces and have more biological sites. Years ago, when we had that B John Deere and those 214 plows, if we didn't shred those stalks and disc it first, how far do you think I'd have made it before it plugged? About third row down right here. And about the second day of doing that, we'd have chopped the stalks and we'd have disked them shallowly in the soil, and then we'd have plowed. Now that was an advantage over a high clearance plow. High clearance plow took us backwards a step. Because now we're burying stuff we shouldn't bury. Anyway, I think that's why I said the guys out here that plow with horses got a real advantage, because the horse gets tired, they raise the plow up and they only go shallow, see? You guys buy bigger tractors, that's a mistake. Row crops. Are you only growing corn and beans? Can you be biological with only corn and soybeans and never have a fibrous root system? Row crops are soil-destroying crops. Can you do that? Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no rule that says you can't do that. How would you have to do that? I will show you some slides that says yes, 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 we can, but you can't just have bare soil. You know, I like to go to that guy and says, I'm sorry, you guys aren't ever going to get to see my soil. I like that kind of a concept. We're going to have something protecting and covering. Mother Nature, does she ever bare her soils? It's called rocks when they do. Livestock manure, how much and any? Are you growing any green manure crops? What are green manure crops? We'll talk about that a little bit later. Biology, are there earthworm presence? Have there been earthworms? Go through these things. Can you dig up residues from down deep? I got this guy up north who went a couple years ago, went to that black, heavy soil, 8-wheel drive John Deere tractors, and I went there, and everything was, every tractor was washed, everything was just meticulous. Went out in the fields, and I said, boy, you know, I kind of like to rotate. I said, I'd rather have a corn and soybean rotation. He says, I do. And I said, oh, my goodness, what is all this stuff I'm seeing down here? That's corn from 2 years ago? He said, yes. And then last year, I said to him, look, I wouldn't even be interested in starting with you unless you give me 10 years. And he said, what? And I said, because because? I say, you're way out here. And if you aren't committed to this thing, and if you don't know where you're going, and you're only going to give it 1 year and you're going to put our fertilizer on, you think, I don't have miracles. You're not going to move very much. You might move a little. If we get a bad year, say, see, that didn't work. But you got a problem, because when I dig up those residues, they're full of white molds and funguses, and the weed pressure's unbelievable. Sprayed his beans 3 times, and there's no headlands left because they died. And there we are. And last fall, I got the message back. I chose not to work with him. I got the message back that he said I was absolutely wrong, because when everybody else couldn't go, he was able to go through his fields, because after 6 inches, he only sunk in 6 inches. His ground had to be soft, and then he could work. What do you think was 6 inches deep in his soil? Oh, a layer of cement. How he farmed. And his tractors held right there, and away he went, and he plowed her one more time. See, you got to look at, boy, the history is unbelievable. You got to get out and dig and look. The crop's grown and the rotations, the yields. What did you get for yields? How are your yields doing? What's the pattern over time? Now let's go. So if you did, that's the history. Now let's look at the soil. Do you have a complete soil audit? Soil characteristics are under number 2 there. I'm skimming over some of these. I'm just trying to paint the picture as to what you do for evaluation so you can make a common sense decision as to where to go. Do you have a complete soil audit? Remember, your objective is not to get a perfect soil test, but it gives you clues. We're detectives. We're looking for clues. You answer all that, and you give me a complete soil test. I have a clue as to what's going on. Now, if you're from Florida or Hawaii, I need more information, because I know if you're from Dakotas, when I say, well, that's why when you said you grew red clover, I wanted to know how you handled it, because right away I thought about, gee, it only rains about 10 inches. Now what do you see? If you grow red clover, it's hard to grow 2 crops. You don't even get 1 good one. And so you got to look at where you're from and what you're doing. I'd have to have that information also. Evaluate the soil's cation exchange capacity. You familiar with that? CEC. I'm going to get into a soil test after my slides later, but I want to talk about nutrient holding capacity. This is a soil colloid or a humus particle. Cation exchange capacity is nutrient holding capacity. What is the pH of that soil right there? Can you tell me? If I give you some more clues, I left a couple of sites open. What would you suspect the pH would be? Above or below 7? Below, because we have hydrogen present. So a pH tells you what? It tells you have a lack of minerals on sites in your soil. Did it tell us what was short? No. A pH is a real poor guess at what's going on in the soil. It gave me very little clues as to what's happening. If you got a P and a K and an organic matter and a pH test, you didn't tell me much yet, because I don't know if was this site, should have calcium been on that site? Maybe zinc should have been on that site. How do we know? We didn't test that, so I got to have a complete audit. Now the CEC is this, cation exchange capacity. If that CEC is 5, what does that mean? What kind of soil is that? Sandy. There's no sites. There's no humus. There's no sites. I have to totally farm that different if that CEC is 15 or 25. Now, if you've got a 15 or 25, if I put 500 pounds of material on each one of these acres and I went back and retested them, which one will show the biggest change on the soil test? The sand. This guy down here, you'll wonder where you put it. You better be home when he spread it to make sure you got it. Now, this guy here, what's really shocking to me is, in central Wisconsin, on these soils right here, we plant 40,000 plants. We target 250 bushel of corn. We pump water, and we provide chemistry, and we average between 190 and 240 bushel of corn in 1996. This guy right down here struggles for 125. Something is wrong. This guy's got all the potential. This guy has none, and this guy's just destroying this guy in yields. Oh, he had to spend money to get it. He's maybe growing it hydroponically. He had to put balanced nutrition out there. He couldn't dump on more N, P, and K to get it. He had to do a balance of everything, but he was capable and able to do that. Where this guy right here, in some of these cases, this is the worst, hardest situations I work with are right there. That heavy soil that's got a lot of clay. It's got such an imbalance, and it lost its biology, and it holds chemistry so well. It's what he was talking about where the sugarcane was, that is a long, hard road to hoe, but it has tremendous potential. So, how do you get these nutrients available? Exchange capacity just measures the ability to hold nutrients. The only way you can unlock that, it doesn't tell us anything, it just tells us what we have for capacity, how big the truck is. It has to be a combination of chemical, physical, and biological, and that's the reason why these guys with these heavy soils are having trouble, because they have not properly taken care of any three of those. And then it's easier out here. You know, how much nitrogen can you hold in sand? 3 inches of rain and whatever you put on, I'll guarantee is gone. How many chemicals can you hold in sand? That's why they get this fertilizer company in Wisconsin that sells commercial fertilizers and chemicals. They bring bottled water into their own office. They farm around themselves. Why do you think they do that? Because they can do a lot better because it flushes itself. These heavy soils don't flush. How would you flush them? Biologically. It's the only shot you got. That's the only shot. But we're going to start out with this balance. If that was my farm out here, I would get my V-ripper out. I would aerate that ground. I would then put my right chemistry on there. And Purdue University did an interesting study. They put calcium and sulfur on the soil conservation department out of Purdue. They're trying to figure out how to stop erosion because no-till didn't work. Believe me, it didn't stop erosion. How would it stop erosion? If I got a cement hillside and I poured water on it and I had a lot of trash laying on top or residues, would it stop the water from running off? No. What stops the water from running off is biology, that loose crumbling ground. You can't get it to run off. So when they took and added calcium and sulfur to a soil surface, they improved water infiltration by 250% on a no-till. The product they used was called gypsum, but that's okay. It gyps some if you use it in the wrong spot. So anyway, to unlock that potential is what this whole thing is all about, and to look at what where that chemistry thing goes in. So if I got that kind of a soil, I'm going to use, that's why we're evaluating. I'm going to use all tools to go out there and say, well, I'm going to get a biology, I'm just going to grow rye and then everything will be fine. No, we're going to do everything. Success is not doing one thing right. It's not buying one thing from these booths. It's buying everybody's things out here. Did you bring the checkbook? No. So, anyway, I wanted to point that out a little bit about soil. You can get me the lights back on over there. Because I'm doing this soil audit and I'm looking at CEC, the soil type. We mentioned those things, right? Does your soil have limits? If you got this sand, you got this clay, I got a sandy loam on top with 3 foot of subsoil clay. I prefer to farm sandy loams. Oh, they're nice to farm. That drain fairly well. If you get our newsletter, you'll find out I did a kind of a joke in there because farmers are real good at this, and I'm always trying to tease and jab at people's, I'm trying to rattle their thinking is what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to aggravate you. I'm trying to get you to think. And I said out there, now, if you made all decisions next year on this last year, you certainly wouldn't use an insecticide on corn anymore because it didn't work very well this last year because the rain timing and things was off. If you were in Michigan, you wouldn't even consider farming without tile. And if you're in southern Wisconsin, we'd have irrigation and we wouldn't even start the year. You see, and so if you look at, you can't make the decision on a short-term basis. You got to make it on a long-term thing. This soil physical characteristics are really, some of these are real limiting factors. Like I said, if you've got some of those severe limitations, you'll probably never get there, but you can sure move. It doesn't, all you got to do is sometimes do what? Quit what you've been doing and you already move. That's true. That's a change. You made a change. You did a positive, and you didn't buy a thing to do that. Say, let's see, now what am I going to buy tomorrow? No, I'm going to quit something tomorrow. I'm not going to buy it. I'm going to buy less. Buy less fuel.
Wish Congress would do that.
Just quit. So is drainage a problem? The physical out here, does your soil probe easy? Is it loose and crumbly? Does it have a nice smell? Is it sticky? Our plant roots, digging into the ground, our plant roots huge and healthy. Then the biology, are there a lot of earthworms? Earthworms are easy to count. Are there a lot of castings? I worked with this guy out there, he didn't have any earthworms, so he said I went uptown and bought $100 worth of earthworms, and I'm driving out there taking soil samples. I had the box on. He said, otherwise I wouldn't have done it because nobody saw me. I'd take a soil sample and throw out a handful of worms, he said. He wanted them so bad, and I kept thinking all day. He said, he said, I thought of all the ways in my lifetime I've blown $100. And he said, I'm out there planting earthworms. And he said, he said, I finally got some, and I said, it's an amazing thing. This organic farm we bought, I should have had people out there walking it, because when we bought it, I couldn't find an earthworm anywhere. I couldn't find them. And the ground is solid castings today, and I never planted one. Where did they come from? The cocoons and the things were waiting for me to show up. 3 or 4 years ago in the Midwest out here, we had maybe 5 years ago. Time flies when you're having fun. And anyway, it was a dry spring with a low humidity, and lamb's quarters were scattered all over this Midwest. I kept joking to guys. I said, "Oh, you bought that Pioneer seed with lamb's quarters in it this year, huh?" Because everybody had it, and I plant Pioneer. It gives me the right to tease them. But you see, they didn't. The seeds were there waiting for the ideal conditions. When the conditions came, the seeds grew. And the foxtail grows under ideal conditions. You take the conditions away and it quits growing. Don't try to get rid of the seeds. Someone says, I bought some rye from a neighbor and I didn't clean it. I just took it home and spread it on my field. And they said, "You spread his seeds?" I said, "I got plenty of my own. I just added a few more to mine. I'm not worried about seeds. That's fertilizer. I'm not worried about those. I'm worried about setting up conditions that make them grow. That's what I'm trying to change." And when you talk about your weeds, I don't want your weeds. I got enough bad ones of my own. So, to smell the soil, to look at the biology, and everything else. Now, the next section's on testing. I am going to stop right here for a little break. I've been throwing out a lot of things because we're going to get more into a soil test. Take a couple minutes stretch. Like I said to you guys, I can see my time slipping away. I got a whole bunch of slides in there. I spent a lot of time last night trying to sort out of my 600-some things to show you. So you come back in, and I want you to take a little stretch because we're going to turn the lights down, and I'll go through some slides, and then we'll take pictures in your mind of what I've been talking about, and then we'll go through an actual farm case. So 5 minutes, 6 minutes. And I said to Fred, I thanked him for the Acres magazine because I couldn't find anything to stick under the hold of the projector up, and it worked really well. You know, I know that's what I was supposed to use it for. I didn't know. That new Living Color Acres, huh? And I wonder what my subscription rates are going to do. Oh.
2 more Acres.
What's that? 2 more. Anybody got any Acres magazines? Hey, I got my eraser here. That'll work. I thought I had enough. See, you know, that worked really well. Now we can get rid of my Acres. Here, I'll pull this thing down. I'll adjust the screw now. Screw it up. Hey, we're on. Well, we got to start out and look at what your objective is. I tell you, there's some questions and things. I'm going to be here all the time, and I said we have our booth in there. You certainly don't, if you got some questions, I would certainly be glad to visit with all you that I can. And so do catch me some other time. I know there's quite a few people that may have some questions. I'll try to answer them. I don't certainly have all the answers. I don't claim to. So you can catch me another time. What is your objective, your greatest dream, the potential biological farmer? I hope I kind of gave you some ideas on that, and I think it's far greater than we perceive. Don't put limits on your thinking. I said, I got mine. People say I'm way out there beyond limits, and I said, I don't think so. I believe that's really potential and possible. What do you want from your soils? You really want yield is just one factor. You want to have a quality crop. How do you define quality? I was talking about the dairy industry a while ago. See, we're really excited about the dairy, so I started talking about numbers. When we started violating the feed test, violating the ration computer sheets, we saw something in the dairy industry that I was shocked. And, of course, it wasn't me that discovered this thing because being a trained dairy nutritionist, it was some farmer that we balanced the ration for, and it called for 5 pounds of protein and 9 ounces of minerals. And I went there, and he fed 1 pound of protein and 4 ounces of minerals. He said, I hope you don't get mad about that. And I said, mad about that? These are your cows. Things went better. And then we started asking questions. We are really convinced that we can get an awful lot of milk on high-quality forages. Define high quality. A mineral balance. What do you want in your food? You're going to hear Joe Wallach talk about some minerals. You're talking about toddies and minerals. Where do they belong? What is our food missing? Minerals. It's not balanced minerals. It's not fresh. Doesn't have vitamins. You better look at supplements. If we go out here to our livestock, if we mineralize and balance, that's all. That plant is the trucker of minerals from that soil. It also has enzymes and life in it if the food is fresh. So I got to have that thing balanced with a load of minerals. And we look at a feed test, we can increase the mineral concentration of alfalfa by 25%. I can raise your calcium levels by 50%. We can double your sulfur. When I increase the sulfur content of your alfalfa, I've increased the quality of protein. It takes sulfur to make protein. And now when you feed that to cattle, don't follow somebody's computer sheet because you're making a mistake. All your good work you threw away. Anyway, that's quality, is a balance of minerals on grown on healthy soils. That's what quality is. No erosion. That's 25 earthworms in a cubic foot and 0 erosion. Then you become sustainable. And you get healthy livestock when you grow it on healthy, mineralized, balanced soils. Is that it? I think we got a problem. Well, this must be it. No. What is erosion? Erosion is dirty water running off a field. It's not the gullies. If we're a bunch of earthworms down under the soil, and this is the dirt and the food above us, and it's raining out there, and this water comes down and we all get dirty, we got a severe erosion problem. Because the soil that's in that pail, take a look at it. You take that bucket and poke holes in the bottom and pour water through it, and the water will come clean. The soil is a filter. That shouldn't wash dirt and soil particles. What is that? Silt and fine products that ought to be cemented together in aggregates biologically. And so when you see this kind of erosion, the farmer's kind of hiding off to the side there, but if you see this kind of erosion going on, that is severe erosion, because you don't have structure from biology. How much fertilizer do we need to grow a crop with that kind of a root system? Somehow or another, maybe subsoil several years ago. It found a place to get through, but look at that. Oh, there's even that. Roots and tight and hard and packed. Now throw some herbicides in there for a little root damage on top of it, and boy, I don't think you better cut down on your fertilizer quite yet if that's the kind of root you're growing. That ground is hard and tight and packed. Maybe you'd better disc it twice more. You think that'll help you? Ooh. You see, you got to look at now here, a loose, crumbly ground with lots of earthworms. I was at field days. I have a lot of fun with that. See, you got the big ones and you got the juveniles. I was in National Geographic. Everybody get to see that picture? I'm glad you did. It's on page 75, December 95. Anyway. You didn't see it, did you? Well, it was about a revolution in agriculture, and they came out to our farms, and then this guy from National Geographic, I took him out to my best field of my farm. I was talking about biological farming. He was the photographer, by the way. He didn't even write the story. Now, he didn't tell me that up front because I educated the wrong guy. But anyway, we're out there digging, and I'm looking for earthworms, and I said, I'll just show you all these earthworms. And I got out there, and I dug, and I couldn't find a single worm. Took them in my best field. And I'm saying, well, they were here a year ago. Now, have you ever been there? Have you ever tried this? So then I said, oh my gosh, I got half my field plowed trying to find him an earthworm. And anyway, what it was July. They were all dead. If Mother Nature's cycle works properly, if you raise earthworms out here, if you want an earthworm to lay cocoons, what do? Take the food away, they lay cocoons and die. 25 earthworms in the cubic foot's 80 units of nitrogen from old dead dying earthworms. They gotta die. If they got food year-round because of poor management and poor decomposition, you got tons of earthworms in September. That's not necessarily an advantage. The earthworms ought to die off in July, give up their nutrients, let the bacteria eat on them, and little babies would start hatching. As the plant matures, the roots start dying, and leaves start dying back. Now there's fresh food, and the little guys will hatch. I usually dig in the soil, I get it in my hand, and I say, oh, look at that. I said, that little worm. And I said, that looks like about a 2-week-old one. And I keep joking these guys. I keep aging all these guys. And no one ever questions me because they don't really know either. Heck, I could be 16 years old. I don't know. It's a nice story. Try it sometime. You'll find out how little people know about that. Take the guy that you think is the smartest and try that on. Anyway, a loose, crumbly ground is the biology in the soil. This is what we're really looking for. A huge root system. How much fertilizer on that crop? You think that's 200 bushel corn? Yes, you're absolutely right. Grown with extremely small levels of fertilizer in central Iowa. You just joke at the amount of fertilizer the guy uses. He's a hog farmer. How much money do you think he's got? But look at that root system. He's got something going, though, doesn't he? Look at that one. What do you think that does to soil structure? I'll guarantee you there's no 92330 on there. Well, if he did, it would be in here. No, I don't know. That's you know what's kind of interesting out there, because we talked about chemical, physical, biological, electromagnetic. Now let's talk about hormones. Cytokinins grow roots. Kelp. Kelp is a root growing above ground in the ocean, right? It has no cell structure. It's high in cytokinins. You want this plant, when you put a lot of nitrogen on, and you get a plant top dominant, you know what that is? You got it auxin dominated now. Auxins are hormones that grow tops. 2,4-D is the first man-made auxin. If you get them, if you don't get the plant, and cytokinins and auxins are always in balance. They need to be in balance. If they get out of balance, you get a lousy root system because you put on too much soluble fertilizer the day you planted the corn. or the day you planted the potatoes. And if you get top growth and not bottom growth, it's because you've got your balance of fertilizers are out of line. You got too many auxins to cytokinins. Now, you say, oh my gosh. Well, yes, you don't need to know all this stuff. Common sense will help you. Just call one of our consultants. No. They probably don't all know it either. Now, out here, you say, well, let's fix this thing. We're going to plow down this stuff. We're going to plow that down. First of all, I want to chop that in small pieces. That's not exactly what I had in mind. Now, that may work. He may be able to get away with this once. This is not a farming method. If that ground is under the right conditions, he may not create a hard pan. We got two things that work. One of those will build humus, and one will not. A green manure crop does not increase humus in your soil. If you want to increase your organic matter and humus, you wouldn't plow down little succulent alfalfa. You feed that to a dairy cow and get 20,000 pounds of milk, or feed it to your soil life. I rent a farm from some Buddhist monk, and he wants to farm organically. And last spring it was cold in our part of the country, and he was out in his garden. And he said, "Why aren't you planting your corn?" And I said, "Because the ground is 37 degrees." And he said, "No, it's not. It's 62." He got his little soil thermometer out. We went over to his garden. He said, "I tilled this with a rotavator 3 days ago." And he said, "It's just like turning a compost pile. I warmed my soils up. Now you can plant." Think about that. So when you shallow incorporate a green manure crop, you have a warming effect on the soil, like turning the compost pile. That green manure crop will be gone in 10 days or something's wrong. And I want to shallow incorporate it. Well, this stuff here might build organic matter. This is fibrous, complex carbohydrates, and that's sugar. Guys talk about throwing molasses out there. Why not talk about plowing down or working? Not plowing, working and shallowing a nice, fresh, succulent green manure crop. If you feed that soil livestock like you feed your cows, you'll be successful. If you don't have any cows, do it anyway. This is Clyde from the rotavator. Clyde Mortar, and he's describing it extremely well. You shallow incorporate your residues. He wants them right there where the fence post rots off. Now you say, this is a Midwestern Bioag Learning Center. This is not organic, this is biological. You say, oh my gosh, I can't plant in there. Did you ever hear of row cleaners? I hang all kinds of stuff on my planters because I'm going to plant right in that. If I have got a planter that can't tolerate that conditions, I want to change my planter. It's 1996, guys. If you want to do this, you know, everybody says, oh my gosh, that cultivator of yours is $15,000. And I see now, I got to cultivate 300 acres, and not use herbicides, and I got that $15,000 cultivator already paid for. And I still got the cultivator in the shed, and the herbicides are gone, right? It's a matter of my corn planter is going to plant in this stuff. And I'm going to be able to grow a crop in there on an organic farm because I got the right kind of tools to do that. Now, the other things you can do, I'm looking at examples and practices that we can do out here. Compost is a wonderful thing. Is that totally essential and necessary? Oh, I don't know. It certainly isn't a bad practice. What is that doing? Digesting it above the soil. If you had ideal soil conditions, do you need to do that? You know what sheet composting is? A light coat of manure on a lot of acres. A slinger manure spreader was the best invention of the 80s. Not my favorite thing right here. A chisel plow is absolutely no better than a moldboard plow. Why would it be? You're over-aerating, disturbing the soil, and now he's probably putting on manure so thick that we got a lousy feed, toxic soil conditions, excess of potassium and nitrates, and an anaerobic condition we just created. I'm not excited. If we got a light coat of manure on a lot of acres and put it on top of corn stalks with carbon, get your carbon to nitrogen ratios in line. Do you understand that? If you don't, do some studying about that. If you got a lot of carbon, add more nitrogen. If you got a lot of nitrogen, add more carbon. Why would you have a lot of nitrogen? Ooh, but don't put so much on. A lot of excess manure ought to go on carbon materials. If you're going to compost this, you can't compost. We got a grant to compost chicken manure in Wisconsin, and I know last year Amigo spoke here and he said the two things I wouldn't try to compost are chicken manure and sawdust. Well, that's what I got. And so we're trying to compost chicken manure and sawdust. You can't compost chicken manure without the sawdust, and two together you still can't do very well. One's too soluble, it's too solid, there's not enough aeration going in. We're probably going to add some corn cobs. If you can't figure anything else, go to grazing. Now, to be successful in grazing, this is down in Indiana. We're talking about this. There's a guy in here, this old Matt Wiley. He's quite a character. 1,500 sheep, 1 man, 6 dogs. And 7 years after he went to grazing with those sheep, I dug in his soils and found cornstalk residue. It's getting better. I could have speeded that up with a little tillage before he started. Now, what about mineral balance? If you don't, this cow out here wants a mineralized, balanced diet. You just open the gate, are things going to get better? Oh, they get better. Well, gosh, maybe no tilling is better than what you had been doing. Maybe it's removing a negative, but there's a lot more to it than that. grazing has got its place. You may want to do that. Now let's see, you guys are out here, you're going to have to grow a rotation. I thought you can't do corn and soybeans, right? We got to rotate. We're going to grow alfalfa. And you say, oh, I don't want to grow alfalfa. This is Otter Creek Organic Farm, by the way. That's a green manure crop. And it was supposed to have been plowed down last spring as a green manure crop, rotivated in the spring, and it was so wet we left it one more year. Guy said, you're going to tear that up? And I said, you bet. You know how well my soil livestock would have loved that? That was 6.5 tons of a 20% protein alfalfa we got off that per acre off that field, and that was going to be a green manure crop. And it would have been if it wouldn't have been so wet last spring. That was the cheapest alfalfa seed I could buy, by the way, and that's 12 pounds an acre. That's northern grown alfalfa kind of stuff. I didn't buy that expensive so it's going to last forever because my rotation's kind of different than a lot of people. I only leave alfalfa in 1 year. This is Gene Vogel out in Michigan, and I just wanted to point out, he used to be a wheat, corn, and bean farmer. Now, I'm just giving you some ideas and practices. If you're a wheat farmer, how hard is it to, in the springtime, throw a little ammonium sulfate balanced fertility out and throw some red clover seed with it? That was free. That was free. He didn't make any more trips to do it. He never did that practice ever before. He's an innovative farmer of Michigan, and I'll show you some more slides about his farm. It's kind of interesting. So now you're a corn and bean farmer. Let's look at some practices. This is rye after soybeans. I don't even till the ground anymore. Actually, I was talking to Pascal about that because this year we had a late harvest. We had a late plant. I'm never home. I don't have my corn all combined yet. I planted my rye on the 18th of November on 2 inches of snow, and I called my friend in Michigan, and I said, is it too late to plant rye? And he said, yep, any day after the 15th is too late because that's when I planted mine. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. It may not grow, but the seed will become fertilizer. While we do, everybody says, boy, this is a fertilizer buggy spreading pattern. He said, well, how come you didn't drive quite close enough? He said, I said, can't you see I'm running out of seed? I was trying to stretch it out. See, I didn't quite make it. But that's after soybeans. Ideally, now, let's not make more work. Let's use our heads. I made another trip out there. It's not necessary. Why don't you give me a seeder that fits on top of my combine with a belly thing underneath that dribbles the seed while I combine my beans? No more trips, no more work, no more effort. And I did a job, didn't I? Interseeding in corn. If you're a herbicide guy, band your herbicides and put a 20-inch band of clover and seeds down in my corn. I used a whirly seeder to do this. We don't use any herbicides and insecticides in our farm. Now, if you're going to grow corn on corn, I don't have to use any insecticides. Next year my corn will be planted right here. I'm not growing corn on corn. I'm not growing corn on corn. I'm growing corn on clover. Isn't that right? Although every year I harvest a corn crop. You know what that costs every year? Everybody says, well, I tried it and I failed. And I said, I've got to remember, didn't I tell you when you start this thing, I said that 6 out of 10 years, if you're successful, get excited. So if you fail the first 4 times, the next 6 years, there can be success. Just remember that. So don't give up. Don't give up. Some of you guys say, oh, yeah, maybe you better question something before you make your 6 failures. I don't know. And the same thing out here with rye. I don't have to, if I'm not successful this year, that doesn't mean I'm going to quit it. I was just too late this year, and I was still determined to plant my rye. Now, if I got green rye next spring, I'm going to be excited because I should have failed this year. What am I going to do with this year? Yes, there's a real conflict in my mind about this, and that's a good question. When the corn was combined, I like to shred my stalks. I wouldn't mind doing fall tillage, but next spring, this clover, I use red clover, annual ryegrass, oilseed radish, and vetch as my combinations. And I'm not saying there's not better ones. These are just the ones we use. Ask me why I use red clover and annual ryegrass, because they're cheap, and I'm a German. And, no. I don't know. I use those because I put on about $5 or $6 an acre worth of seed. I cultivate anyway. And now, if I would chop these stalks in the fall and till that down in the fall, that would be one thing. The soil life wants its food on top and it wants to be left alone. If I let this kind of go dormant, I'll get another green manure crop. These guys out here that are crazy about being the first guy to plant, better ask some real hard questions. Any condition less than ideal at planting is unacceptable, and I don't care if it's June 15th. No, when it gets June 1st, then you can do anything you want. But up to June 1st, it better be ideal conditions. On June 13th, we kind of mudded it in. It was running out of time. But this thing, I got to have it planted by May 10th. I'll take you on any day and plant under ideal conditions that green manure crop and that healthy soil. What are these satellite dishes and these monitors and combines telling guys? What are they telling them? It's not the P and K levels in the soil don't make any difference on yield. It's the soil health, the tilth, and the drainage, and the biological activity, and the calcium and the magnesium ratio is what yields. I'll challenge you any day with my 95-day corn. You can grow your 110 and plant yours 10 days sooner. I don't care. You got it. Let's get the way wagons out. I might plant a little thicker than you do. Other practicing tools, if you got a problem, you better aerate that ground. You better look at getting down in there and put some air in that soil. Make sure you got drainage. You got to have drainage. Biology, anaerobic conditions you're trying to get away from. If you got good soil, the earthworms will do that all. That doesn't necessarily need to be that way. Now, this here, I believe, was switchgrass. This is the rotavator at work. See, this tool here, I'm not saying everybody has to have a rotavator. There's tools out here to do the job. I was a Brookside consultant. What do you think they recommended back 20 years ago? A Miller offset disc, didn't they? You know what's wrong with the Miller offset disc? I got to make a lot of trips. It really slabs this thing over and does all these things. So what happened was Clyde out here, I complained about a rotavator one time at a meeting, and he heard about it. I said, guys that got gardens out, I told him a Troy-built tiller makes hamburgers out of my earthworms. And he told me I didn't know how to use it. And you know, he was right. Because you see, I saw this tiller guy going out in his garden every third day with his Troy-built, and their garden looked like cement. And they were tilling that ground of that rotavator, but they're going that deep. And they were making hamburgers out of the earthworms and destroying the soil structure. Well, what happens is you take a 10-foot rotavator and a 95-horsepower tractor. Now, I'll guarantee you one thing, you're going to go shallow. That's the secret. I figured it out the first year Clyde brought it out there. No, that's a little bigger tractor. But it incorporates. Now, right now, you got to realize that the shields are up, and this is a first pass, early spring. You can see it was probably a little muddy. That looks like a lot of residue on the ground. Normally, we put a basket on the shield down. That's how I make one-pass tillage, and it works well on my organic farm. Now, everybody says, what are you doing out there in the snow? Well, I haven't got my fall tillage done yet, and we will still get it done. I like going through frozen ground because I can really go shallow. You put an inch of frost on the ground, and the rotavator blade's like a knife on a cutting board. Now, under 6 inches of snow, that's not a problem. Now, we got enough snow cover right now. I think I can do that. One of the reasons is this. 2 years in a row now, 1995 and 1996, I was not allowed to do fall tillage. You know why? We never got any rain from the middle of August until the middle of September. This year, the first week in October. We never got any rain from the middle of August to the first week in October. The earthworms, the soil was dormant. The earthworms did not hatch. So when the rain came the first week in October, the earthworms hatched and the soil was live with my baby earthworms all up on top. If I would have tilled, what would have I done? Destroyed 75% of them. So I left it alone. I now will till. Because now they're down, they got their colonies, they moved down, they're out of my zone because it got cold, they moved out of the way. If we'd had moisture early and they'd had their food and they'd have got a chance to get a little bigger and out of my way, I could have tilled earlier. But that 2 years in a row, I got stuck on that. I was not able to fall till. So it's why are you tilling and what damage are you doing and what benefit are you doing when you go out there to till? We also, this is my son out there with a rotary hoe. We don't use herbicides. This is Otter Creek Organic Farm. There's 120 tillable acres in this field. It's silt loams, about an 8 to 10 exchange capacity. I plant in furrows. And that's I got row cleaners on my plant. It moves all the residues out of the way. If you want to be unhappy about rye, plant rye after soybeans. Go in there next spring and let it get that tall. Work it in the ground and go plant seeds in it. Hang on for failure. Now, if you take that rye and shallowly work that in the ground, and I'll put row cleaners on it, make sure you plant seeds in solid soil, firm soil, and all that straw and rye residue is not where you stuck your seeds, or you will fail. That's why guys curse rye out. It's not that rye doesn't work, it's that we haven't figured out how to work it. That's what it's all about. A rotary hoe, and it's got its place. The other thing I wanted to talk about tillage tools. Last year I had the privilege, I used to run around an old cultivator, but electronic guidance system and a Buffalo cultivator. Again, I'm sure there's other tools that work out here. I was amazed. I was so spoiled that I can't get over this thing because Pascal told me out here that I had this old iron cultivator, and my son wouldn't cultivate because he didn't like to look back and see all the beans and corn disappear. These $18 beans are not fun to cultivate out, you know, and so he didn't want to cultivate, and so now I can get him to cultivate. That electronic guidance system out there, you can even watch the clouds. You can almost just kind of go anywhere out there, and it'll kind of stay online. But anyway, we have tools today that we actually can replace herbicides with. I was just absolutely amazed. 6-7 miles an hour and beans that tall. Hang on, guys, we're going, and don't look back. And it does a wonderful job. I was just absolutely amazed by that. This is not my farm. I think this is Western Iowa University. They got 80 acres that's never ever used herbicides on. And that's where this slide came from. My trouble was I was cultivating and not taking pictures. See, what you got is you got your disc, and I was always looking at disc killers, and I learned something about disc. You want to roll the dirt away and then roll it back under the shields. This ground looks a little wet and clumpy. They may need a good soil consultant down. I should give them my phone number. No. Anyway, See, you can get those. You can really do a job. It's 1996. We got tools, guys. We got tools, just like herbicides. We got tools that can do the job, and that's what I wanted to talk about. This is not a pretty picture. That's my farm. This here field, you can say, oh my gosh. Well, I'm trying to learn how to set that thing. Here's what I went into. First of all, I planted these beans about the middle of May, and I never got back into the first week in June. Never got rotary hoed. Then I went in there when it was too wet because the beans were coming up. What was I going to do? I would have burned it. Now, I got a flame cultivator. That's what I got in National Geographic. It was my flame cultivator. Now, I would have burned it. But the trouble was, we were making hay. I was trying to till. We were planting, and he wanted me to burn that same day, too. Now, there's only so many hours in a day. So we had to toss. I could rotary hoe faster. I could get the burner out and get it set up and get it going. If I would have burned when they were spiking the ground, I could have really had good, clean weed control. We have the tools to do the job, is my point. So you say, well, I was ready. If I could have got the seed, we just started over right now with new seeds, tilled it all up, back in there again, but I couldn't get the seed. These are HP 204s, and so there's the beans. I'm unhappy. The stand is poor. I rotary hoed and I thinned the stand. I got some weed pressure. There's 32 bushel an acre I averaged on that field at $18.50 a bushel. Is that a crop failure? It was to me. But it wasn't when I look at the end of it. That's a crop failure. This is the burners out in Michigan. They stick their burner straight down over top of a row. This is an 8-row burner out here. And I didn't have a decent picture of a burner. They have their place. When those beans are breaking and those leaves are coming out of the ground, that corn is spiking, that's tiled ground that's poorly drained, and they can't rotary hoe. They'll burn. They won't let, if these beans, they'd rather burn their beans off than not burn. That's edible beans. They absolutely swear by it. They have a lot of success with those burners, and they put them right straight down over top of the row at that stage. I can't always get that done. Now, I got this picture in here, and this is not I don't know what kind of cultivator it is, because I figured it out this summer. Everybody says, well, yeah, you got cultivators out there. I said, you only got a 200 tillable acres. And I said, yeah, and I run this business out here, and I'm never home. And I figured it out. The difference between men and boys is not the price of their toys. It's the width of their toys. If you got a bigger farm, get a bigger toy. So if you got a 200, 400 acres, get an 8-row. You got 4,000 acres, get a couple of 16 rows. It's not a problem. So anyway, that's a bigger farm and bigger toys. Let's look at soil evaluation. Every farm is different. You need to dig and look at get that soil in your hand and dig down in that ground. I want to tell you that this sandy soil, to put a program together on that sand is not the same thing as putting a program together on a heavy black ground. You can grow wonderful crops here, but they're not the same. You better figure out how to put a program together. It's just like when I was out in Idaho. We were walking out to the shed, and I said, every farmer's got a limiting factor of some kind. And he said, I don't. And I said, I think it's between your ears. Everybody's got a limiting factor. If you don't think you got one, you really got one. But anyway, they did have wonderful crops. 80% base saturation of calcium and a deficiency of calcium in potatoes. Want to talk about that? Just because the soil test says it's there doesn't mean it's there, right? pH is 8, no biology. They couldn't get these nutrients. They're going to start adding calcium to soils with 80% base saturation of calcium in a heavy clay soil. Nice. This year I work with a farmer on sand in Wisconsin. They own the nitrogen manufacturing company. They farm 10,000 acres. We saw nitrogen deficiencies in their crop. You know what they put on? Manganese. And the nitrogen deficiencies went away. That's not a nitrogen deficiency. It's not, because it doesn't look like one. That could be a manganese deficiency. I just want to point out that the plant's trying to tell us something too. And a tissue test is nothing to build a soil fertility program on. That's after the fact and throwing the weather and the bad root system in the formula. So there's a lot of things about this. This is also kind of interesting. This is a guy from Escanaba, Michigan, John Draz. He farms a couple thousand acres. I didn't think there was a couple thousand acres in Escanaba, Michigan that you could farm. And he milks 200 cows. It's kind of interesting guy. He found this at a dairy show, and he said, I know there's a better way. I know there's a better way. There's something wrong with this NPK formula of farming. There's something missing. He said, I can't figure it out. They milk 200 cows. They were feeding 11 pounds of protein a day and X pounds of mineral a day. They feed no protein, only homegrown forages. In the last 15 months, they shaved $120,000 off their feed bill. And our fertilizer, someone said, was expensive. I can't quite figure it out. Now, this guy right here is the head of the soil he's on the Soil Conservation Board up in Escanaba, Michigan. I spoke at their annual meeting. And I don't know if I belong there. But anyway, soil conservation people, they aren't. This isn't necessarily all bad, but some of those guys in that crowd were. But his dad was a little skeptical. You know what this is right here? pHs of 8 and 80% base saturation of calcium. You know what that is out there? His dad was had the fertilizer buggy was not the kind that could spread the product we had in there. It was a calcium, sulfur, and soluble boron source. And so his dad was out spreading it, and he was running low like I did with my rye. And so this is alfalfa. That's with calcium, sulfur, and boron, and that's without. Dad came up to the Soil Conservation Service meeting when I spoke, and he came up afterwards. He says, how much can we put on per acre before we're in trouble? And I said, why would you want to do that? Why don't we put on enough calcium and sulfur to grow the crop we want and get this job done right? I don't want you to overdo this thing now just because you saw a result. But what this farmer's history is, it's really interesting. You put 9-23-30 on as a corn starter, you put manure out there, he's a dairy farmer, and you put potash on to grow hay. He never once used sulfur, boron, or any calcium on that farm, ever. And that's what you get. You know what that guy's feed will be like in 2 years? That is on high calcium soils. Don't ever forget that. But he needed sulfur and boron to get the calcium utilizable, and he didn't have any soluble calcium because of biology. It's kind of interesting. You don't always get to see those things. That's kind of interesting. It gets people convinced. This is hay in Idaho. It really grows. I was jealous. I just had to show you some alfalfa out there. They cut it and windrow it and square bale it the next day. We got to rake it and windrow it and toss it and turn it and spend a week getting it dry, and they don't have any humidity or water. I wanted to point out that you can change plants. This is not Idaho. Everybody talks about solid-stemmed alfalfa. If you've never seen solid-stemmed alfalfa, why do you think you can feed cattle differently? With a lot of potassium, you get a hollow-stemmed alfalfa, you got to cut it in the bud stage. When you start getting a balanced nutrition and get your calcium levels up, you change your cell wall structure with calcium, and you end up with a solid stem in that calcium plant with total different digestibility. That's why the cows don't perform based on the feed test any longer, because that plant is not the same anymore. Totally different. This is out in Michigan. This is Gene Vogel and Pete, our consultant out there. This is Practical Farmer. That's twin-row planted edible beans. They ran 48 bushel the acre, and the average was in the low 20s. Practical Farmers in Michigan. He's got a twin-row planter. He built it himself. Now, going and planting more seeds out there and putting more rows out there is a terrible mistake if you're over there. If you're over here and you want to start getting some yields, put some more seeds out there. Yield is seeds per acre. Straightforward, that simple. Now, if you can put more seeds out there, it's going to fail. They came out with twin-row planters and narrow rows years ago already. I got a birch planter, CJ, designed and worked with 25 years ago sitting in my shed. And why didn't it catch on 25 years ago? Because people didn't understand this thing. If you're farming over there and putting more seeds in the ground, it's a terrible mistake. Get over here, now let's plant some seeds, and I'll show you some yields. But you got to get here first. He's also got a twin-row corn planting thing, and that did not work out. No yield advantage this year on that twin-row corn. That guy is 6 foot tall, and this guy is a little over 5'9". This is Midwestern Bioag Learning Center. That's 76 bushel of beans per acre. I know someone told me if you grow tall beans, you can't get yields. I beg to differ. Now, that's my best field on the farm. That's where I tried to find earthworms, and that National Geographic guy was there. Those are soybeans. They're HP 204 Northrop King soybeans. That is the soybean growth. If you don't use herbicides, everything is ideal out there, and you got things going well, you can't stop them. There's no nitrogen, there's no commercial, there's a little bit of soluble fertilizer. That's balanced fertility out there. That's the field I'm convinced I can grow 300 bushel corn on. I got a twin-row planter this year, but I got troubles with my planter. It's not harvested yet, but it'll be close to 200 this year. I've got some up there. Otter Creek Organic Farms across the road, and this is the Bioag Learning Center. That was 2 years ago at our field days. That corn right here, I said to the guys, now I shed this all out because we talk about everything's got to work right. You got to even plant to work right. That's picket fence planting. Every corn plant was absolutely perfect in a row, and if my whole field would have been like that, that was 208 bushel corn in 1995 when the average in our area was down to 110. But my whole field didn't look like that. Whose fault is that? The manager. Throw enough money in any problem, it goes away. No. Get a new manager. That's what I'm talking about. Even looking for a job? No.
More time.
Yes. I'm standing on Midwestern Bioag Learning Center. I want to point out something. We're going to do the case history study of Otter Creek Organic Farm. The history is this. This is the farm right here. These white we make haylage bales, plastic haylage bales. We wrap them. That hay I showed you back there, that was supposed to be soybeans. Our farm goes up to where that corn stands. That haylage bale's along the side. It's actually 120 tillable acres in that one field. The guys in the local town told me he bought the nicest piece of land in northern Iowa County, because this is northern Iowa County. He bought the nicest piece of land in northern Iowa County that grows the poorest crops. I'm now doing a history study. Is that old-timer dumb? Oh, no. He saw what he saw. And I want to point out was that this guy went on the dairy buyout in the early 80s. Until that day, he never bought 1 pound of commercial fertilizer. That farm had not been limed in 35 years. He said, my crops aren't doing real well. It probably needs lime. I'll show you the soil test in just a few minutes. Then, in 1980s, he went on the dairy buyout. He split the farm in half, and he put half beans and half corn, and he rotated. He didn't use any herbicides and no insecticides on the corn, but he sprayed the beans. His fertilizer was 3 gallons of a liquid 9-18-9 as a starter, and 150 pounds of bulk spread fertilizer mixture of potash and urea. Do you think he was doing well? He got discouraged. He got disgusted. My son wanted to farm. This is our BioAg Learning Center. It's right across the road, and so we put him in debt $250,000, and we went for it. Now, I told the guys, don't you dare buy a piece of land till you get a soil test and do his evaluation. And I didn't want to take a soil test because I knew what it would look like. What do you think it looked like? Well, these were the beans when we bought the farm. They averaged 33 or 35 bushel an acre on that field. Now, you got to keep track of this field. I'm going to keep showing you this field. I'll show you my approach. Those were beans. They were sprayed with Command or some herbicide. I'm not big on my herbicide. You see that right across the road? That's the BioAg field. I showed you those tall beans in there. Well, this would have been the year before that, or 2 years before that. These ran 55, and across the road divides the two fields. They're both Chaseburg silt loams, and one of them's in mid-30s and one's in the mid-50s. That's a clue, right? Not doing well. Not doing well. 38-inch rows, both of us plant. So, I got the farm. I'm going to show you the pictures first, now we're going to look at the data on the paper. So, I divided the farm into 4 hunks, 4 fields. Now, he had it split in half. And so I took my soil sample. What we're showing is this first field. So I went at this thing and I'm going to correct this soil. That's $200 an acre worth of fertilizer. That ground isn't white to start with. That's the 1.5 tons of high calcium lime, 1,500 pounds of biocal, 500 pounds of idophos, 200 pounds of potassium sulfate or 150 pounds, 5 pounds of zinc, 5 of manganese, 2 of copper, 2 of boron. 1 dose, 1 time, 1 shot. Oh, I know someone said I should put my calphos out in the fall and my high calcium in the spring. I don't have time. I got it now. I took possession in the spring. We're going to do this thing. We're going to do this thing. Somebody said $200 an acre. I said, that's not so bad. 20 years at $10 an acre would be $200, right? $20 an acre for 10 years. $20 an acre. So because he didn't fertilize for the previous 20, I'm just catching up what he didn't do. I said to my son, we didn't pay $1,200 an acre. We paid $1,400. Get that straight right up front. Now we're going to invest the rest of it in the fertilizer to fix this broken land. I had to mineralize it. And I mineralized it. So I took 1/4 of the farm. I don't own the bank. I took 1/4 of the farm. The land we're going to seed down. I got a plan and a procedure. I did the history evaluation. I got the soil test. And now I'm working at this. I took 1/4 of the farm. This is the quarter I'm going to seed down. You can see we had our piles of stuff dumped. And this is another shot. I got enough out there, didn't I? You guys ready to do this? I sell fertilizer if you're ready. Oh. No. I want to point out that the fact is that I'm not saying this is not your farm. This is my farm. This is my approach, not yours. But I want to show you something. I had to fix it. Am I going to fix it forever? Am I going to do this $200 every year? I got it broke. It's short of minerals. I'm going to mineralize that soil. I'm going to get the biology going. And I'm going to get out of the way. I seeded it down. I put berseem clover and alfalfa in there. I had it in that for 1 year. The following year, I left a little bit of alfalfa in here. I put a small strip of corn in, and I did corn silage here. After the corn silage, I took the fertilizer buggy, and I went through and I put, there's some hairy vetch in here, and there's some rye. And then I wasn't sure, so I took the rotavator, and I went about 8 miles an hour just scratching the surface. And these rows, I didn't even rotivate. But I got the rye growing now. I put corn silage in there. I'm not afraid to take off a forage crop. There's my rye last spring. Can you pick out the 8 rows that I never tilled at all? We were short of feed. Off of that, this is 8 acres. This section I had the corn silage. That 8 acres was 55 haylage bales of rye that the cows came up, 10 pounds of milk a cow a day when I started to feed it. We made that on the 20th of May last year. It was actually a little wet, a little juicy to make. I needed the feed. We were out of feed. And so I didn't even plow down as a green manure crop. I should have never let it get that big. If I was going to take it down as a green manure crop, I'd have cut it in half. It's starting to head out. But I needed the forage, but I still got all this. Now, you got to realize what happened in the meanwhile. Now I have all the chicken manure from a 100,000 laying operation. All the manure I get. Now, that's what we're trying to compost. And so now I got manure to put on. So I put a light coat of manure. A light coat of manure is 2 tons an acre. I can spread manure and walk barefoot across the field and never step in one speck of manure. That's 2 tons an acre. Did you ever try this stuff? Guys said, oh, I don't know how much manure I got. Oh, about 700 ton. It's about that deep. Anyway, that's watch, just follow that field on. Now, these are the beans. I planted beans. And one of the guys at the local thing said, what did you plant so far apart out there? And I said, well, those are my beans. These are planted on June 13th. I took that rye off. I was going to plant that. That was the end of May. The 20th of May when I did that rye. Well, it rained, and it rained, and it rained, and it rained, and it rained. On the 13th of June, I planted these beans. They're HP 204s. Group 2.5 or whatever they are. Those are those beans. Those people said, what did you plant so far apart? They averaged 45 bushel an acre for me, and I combined them here just a little while ago, and that was planted June 13th, and I was disappointed because I need a different kind of a combine. I was having quite a harvest loss. We lost anywhere between 11 and 30 seeds per foot we left behind. The pods are close to the ground, and I'm having some difficulties getting harvest I want. So I lost between 5 and 8 bushel an acre. HP 204s do not do much. That's a tofu bean. That's $18.50 a bushel. They do not do a whole lot better than 40. That's the same comparison in the other field. Now notice the weed control. You notice the weed control? Do I have a weed problem in this organic farm? Planting later does not hurt me, granted. But that soil fertility and that soil changes and doing that rye does not hurt me. This is my program. Now this is later in the season. I do have a few weeds scattered in here. You can see the beans out here. We took off the corn silage next to it. This is I'm down in a low spot, the little blacker soil, but that's the bio-egg farm. This is that field from that side, and it froze before they ripened and everything else. I also wanted to show you that I did 1/4 of the farm. I did a major fertilizer correction. The other fields out here I did not correct yet. Now I'm on my 3rd field. Every year I do 1/4 of the farm. And I'm altering my corrections based on the field. And now that I got that chicken manure, I'm not having to spend quite as many dollars on P's and K's. But I got to do the calcium. There's some calcium in that chicken manure. Every ton gives me 100 pounds of soluble calcium. Because it's a laying hen operation. I put rye in after the beans. And we go through. At this stage is when I'd like to take it down. I showed you this picture earlier where I spread that with the buggy. This is the same field later. This is that hay I showed you from that long picture. This was supposed to be the one that was tilled down and put into soybeans. See, I seed them down. This is the second field I corrected. I seeded it down, put triticale peas on there, took a triticale peas harvest. We feed cattle. And I feed that to our dairy, our beef. And then I get another cutting of hay. The next year, I'm going to take first crop off, and I'm going to till that up and plant soybeans. So I'm going to leave it in the hay the seeding year and one more cutting. And now it goes into soybeans. You know, next year, this was supposed to have been done last year. I said there's 6.5 tons of dry matter per acre. At $125 a ton, that's not a crop failure. Now, next, it should have been tilled down. You notice that's pretty pure alfalfa. That's perennial ryegrass and alfalfa blend. I like my ryegrasses. Ryegrass is twice as digestible as any other forage with the same feed test. Okay? But you can't see much ryegrass, and we got fairly dry. This is fairly level. There's 145 bales out on that end, 130 behind me, and then we sold. There's another 80 we did on 3rd crop, plus I sold a bunch of dry square bales off of here. And next spring, I'll take first cutting off, which will give me at least 100 bales that we sell at $50 a piece. This is 20 acres, by the way, this section right now. It should be 30, but it got a little messed up. There's some of this stuff I actually tried to till up last year, and it's kind of a disaster. I got 20 acres of good hay in here. Anyway, I'll get first crop off of there, and I already will take that harvest plus plant beans in there. I don't need to leave that alfalfa very long. Farmers leave alfalfa till it dies. I want to get a fibrous root system, and I want to get something to feed that soil life, and turning that nice alfalfa down will do it. Now this is the next, there's the first field I corrected. Here's the next section. There's the one I showed you, that poor crop of beans with the weeds in it, and the alfalfa's that way. 4 fields on this farm. What I want to point out here is everybody in your mind right now, you're saying, yeah, Zimmer, I understand that. You got that chicken manure. Right? That's what you're running through your head. These 16 rows do not get any chicken manure because I refuse to let people use that as their excuse because they don't have the chicken manure. That gets no chicken manure. Now, Bob, plug your ears. So, I got to correct that, don't I? I know no manure. This is corn following beans. I did not put any rye in last year following the beans. And the reason for that is that was supposed to have been corrected and seeded down this year. Well, it rained and rained and rained, and we couldn't get it done, so I planted corn and left the hay. So I threw my rotation off. Now, farmers don't normally do this, but I did. You got to do what you got to do when you got to do it, you know. I left these 16 rows, no chicken manure. But what I did do was, I took Living Earth, Dave Taylor's humate product, put 1,000 pounds per acre, 500 pounds of Idafos, 200 pounds per, I'm back at this crazy thing again. I put 200 pounds of grazer kelp and salt per acre. Now, guys said, what? I said, I use grazer Redmond salt and Icelandic kelp, and I bulk spread 200 pounds an acre. And he said, you did what? I said, my soil livestock, if you figure out how many pounds of livestock I got, I actually shorted them on salt. What Redmond salt's got trace minerals in it, and I got my kelp out there to stimulate my biology, and then I used a starter fertilizer, one we manufacture. It's all organic materials. It's a 655. I put 250 pounds per acre. There's about 15 units of N on there. When I got the combine across this field and went clear to the end, that's Pioneer 3730. We got clear across that field where this nitrogen, where the manure went, and guys that are at our field day saw it. It looked like it was going to yield less. There's 10 pounds less corn without the manure than with the manure. I hauled all that chicken manure. I spread all that chicken manure for 10 pounds of corn on 6/10 of an acre. I got less than 20 pounds more yield advantage from spreading all that chicken manure. But I did spend more money on other things. I can't figure out, as I told you earlier, why that did what it did. But that ran about 170 bushel right here. That's 170 bushel, 166 average. I wanted to show you this. This is the other side of that field. It's on a sandy knolls out here. You can see how brown that got. We burnt up in the end. That was going to do a whole lot better than it did. But we got, all the sandy knolls took a hit. So you got to be careful of something. If you go back and take a look, the sandy knolls are down here. There's a dip in here. There's a little sand on that end. So the corn on that side of the field didn't do as well as over here because there's more sandy knolls on that side of the field. If we'd have got one more rain in there, if I could have just pumped a little water, I'd have taken my yields quite a bit further yet. Anyway, you get what you get. I just wanted to show you the beans on that same field a year before. You can turn the lights back on. That's the slides. I wanted to paint the picture of what Otter Creek Organic Farm is because now we're going to get into chemistry. You see it back there? Yeah. Turn that down. Good morning, America. How are you? You alive and well out here? You got it all figured out now? Confusion is the first step in learning. If you walk out of here confused, I'm excited. I'm real excited. I'm going to get real excited. Wow, he says. Real excited. The reason is that I hope I'm not giving you answers. I don't want to give you answers. I want to give you thoughts. I want to give you so you can do this show and you can become better shoppers and evaluators. Take your little sheet out here and say, but on my evaluation, are you sure this fits me? Go to every booth. Let's see how we do today. Let's see how we do this show. And figure out where that fits you. Well, let's go out here now to the test. Taking action. I got another hour. Is anybody? If you need to take a stretch or something, you may do it, but I'm not going to. I've been stretching this whole time. As long as you're not asleep and I can see you, we're doing fine. If you have to get up and take a stretch or something, you're certainly welcome to do that. You won't really offend me, but I know my time is limiting, and I know a lot of you guys came a long ways. You spend money to come to this conference. I'm trying to unload my load here for you and give you something to think about. And someone said you talk too fast, and I said, no, you think too slow. So there's all kinds of ways to look at this thing, isn't it? So when we get to testing, what does a soil test tell us? I got that section on testing I went through before, and I started a soil test. Let's look at what a soil test tells us. It's kind of interesting. It tells us what a soil test measures. It measures nutrients that they assume a crop can use. Because we're going to look at some soil tests. It measures nutrients that somebody assumes the crop can use. You want to use a water-soluble test? A mild acid extraction test? Does a soil test measure what's in the soil? No. That's why you can send soil tests to any lab you want and you get different results. It doesn't tell what's in the soil. The whole secret to biological farming is this. It's so simple, and I didn't include that sheet, and it's not my information, but on every acre, on an average soil out here, every acre has 35,000 pounds of potassium. Phosphorus is 5,000 pounds. Calcium is 6,000 pounds. Magnesium is 10,000 pounds. Upper Midwest average soil. Now, I won't go through all of them. Does a soil test give you that number and you get it back? No. Earthworm castings are 7 times higher in potassium than the ground they ate their way through. You're starting to catch on. If you want to raise your phosphorus level in your soil, plant oats. I'll take a field and split it. You spread DAP, and I'll plant oats, and let's follow this thing. We'll do this after corn salads in the fall or after your wheat. The next spring in June, we'll test our soil again. I'll guarantee if your pH is above 7 and you're on this side of the bell curve, you're not out there, and you've got a pH above 7, your 200 pounds of DAP will add up here, and your phosphorus reading will now be 5,200 on this side, and your soil test will not change. And I will plant oats, and oats is extremely good, or buckwheat, at sucking the phosphorus out of here, and I'll raise your soil test higher with planting oats than you will with putting on phosphorus. You got to understand how these things fit together and where this all is. What's in the soil? The secret to biological farming is this. Once these soil tests start getting there, and I got some examples in our book, that you can't stop them from getting higher. We've been to farms out here that after 5 years, their potassium levels doubled in their soils. The phosphorus went up and triple. How much did they add? None. And they don't like their potassium levels being that high. And I said, well, why are you unhappy with that? Are the cows sick? No. Are your crops dying? No, they're wonderful. And I said, why are you so unhappy about a test then? Don't take the test if you're unhappy. My daughter was going to Hawaii chili. It was kind of interesting. I was telling some of these guys she got the chili. She was a Rotary Exchange student, and it was a climate similar to California. Their soil test had an absolutely perfect balance of minerals. Their yields are double of California. We think Chile does poorly. I stood in some 250 bushel corn in Chile. 230 they were harvesting. And it was pioneer seed. The bags were on the end of the field from the spring planting. This was in April. Spring planting for them was in November. But anyway, a little confusing. And their soil test was ideal numbers. Whose numbers are right? Are my numbers right? Are Kinsey's numbers right? Are International Lab numbers right? I don't make any difference. Let them interpret those numbers. It's an assumption. They're assuming the plant can get those things. I'll guarantee that's not a correct assumption. If I can get 80% base saturation of calcium out in Idaho and the potato's deficient on calcium, what good did the number do me? It didn't show what was reality. So, in Chile was one thing that was really bizarre about this thing, because I was in grapes and I was in vegetables and I saw diseases and insect problems they didn't have. Their copper level was 5 times higher than anybody ever recommended in this country off a soil test. So maybe we don't have it all figured out yet. So, anyway, a soil test then measures organic matter. If I show you my soil test and the organic matter level drops, does the red flag go up? Fred, my partner back here, took some soil sample and we went and got some finely ground corn cobs. And we mixed them in the soil and boy, the organic matter looked nice. Raise the organic matter level. And when that turns into humus, what happens to the organic matter level? It drops. If you've got tons and tons of residues on top of your ground and a lot of CRP land residue, and you come back and got a high organic matter test, and you're hung up on testing, and you take a test now, and ooh, my organic matter is 3%. 2 years later, it drops to 2.5%. You say, oh, I'm going backwards. You might have converted that to humus. You might have gone forward. You don't want residues to pile up. Accelerated Genetics up in Wisconsin, bull stud, has got the 5% organic matter soils. And they bed these bulls with sawdust. And they got sawdust so thick out there it looks like coffee grounds. The neighbors won't even take it. They grow such poor crops. And the reason they grow poor crops is because no one used enough nitrogen. I've never recommended so much nitrogen in my life as I do on their farm because they got all this sawdust. They got all this organic matter. The soil's kind of black, but the crops do lousy because it's sawdust not converted into anything else is what it is. So organic matter, it measures that. A soil test measures that. A soil test also will measure pH. It measures acidity, I guess. It'll measure that. It'll measure the ratios of these different elements. A soil test will measure that. But it doesn't tell you what the plant's going to get. The ratios sometimes tell you as much as the numbers. So you got to learn how to interpret and look at these things. What doesn't the soil test tell you? It doesn't tell you if any of those minerals are available to the plant at all. Don't get confused with what that is. Oh, I got a wonderful soil test. You got to carry it further. Is that ratio right? Is the plant using it? Sometimes it gets real confusing. What we really noticed, and it's kind of interesting, I said we saw nitrogen deficiency on snap beans, we applied manganese, and the nitrogen deficiency went away. Didn't apply nitrogen, did I? Normally, conventional wisdom, we'd have put nitrogen on. But no, we recognized the manganese deficiency. So that's the ratios and what these other things do, and manganese helps utilization of nitrogen. That's why the balance is so important. It does not measure biological activity, does it? So you can't see that on a soil test. It does not measure health or tilth or soil structure. It does not measure minerals that are in the residue cycle. Oh, a couple of years ago, I put on classes for our consultants all the time. I'm trying to get our consultants trained. I took one of my fields on the bioag farm, and I put on 1,500 pounds of our BioCal, our calcium, sulfur, and boron, and I planted some oats and some sweet clover. and I let the oats, I clipped it off, and I let the sweet clover get tall, and the sweet clover got tall, and that fall, I tilled it up. It looked like the ground was laden full of chicken legs. I took a soil sample. Nothing changed. So I said to his consultants, I said, I put on 1,500 pounds of your product. I spent all that money, and it never showed up on that soil test. Where is it? You can't say I didn't spread it because I did it myself. And not one of them came up with the residues. That sweet clover was 1.5% calcium. At 12 tons per acre of dry matter biomass, my calcium was in the sweet clover. Is it lost? It's right where I want it. I want your minerals to be somewhere. I don't want the ground saturated with minerals. And that's the problem out here with these guys. If you look at this soil, that's my thing about soluble to slow release. If I got a lot of soluble minerals, I interfere with feed quality, and a lot of soluble minerals bring on weeds, and manure is a good source of them, also commercial fertilizer. A lot of soluble minerals shuts down the biology in the soil, particularly mycorrhizal. Don't bother buying that mycorrhizal unless you get rid of your soluble minerals in that soil. And so you got to look at where the soluble minerals in that whole soil is. I want my minerals someplace else. When you take off my soybean crop and I planted rye, any nitrogen that was left over, any soluble minerals now in that plant, I'd like to see it try to leach or erode. How's it going to get away from me? As the biology break it down the following season, it's now available for the crop. That's why it's kind of naive, guys, to come out here in the springtime and put on 300 pounds of a starter fertilizer, row applied, of a soluble fertilizer, and think you fertilized that crop for the year. We use the analogy I do on baby calves, so you guys that got livestock. You go home, the calf is born, put her in a pen. For the next 6 months, I want all its feed dumped in the manger that day. You did it with your corn, you thought it was all right. It's the same thing. You don't want those soluble nutrients. In 2 hours, the University of Wisconsin's research says DAP, applied above a pH soil, you got 2 hours. I like these guys that bulk spread it in the fall. Boy, are they optimistic. Or naive, or been led down the wrong road. Not their fault, necessarily. Stupidity is not knowing, and ignorance is knowing and not doing. Is that right? Is that how that works? Think about that. So if you don't know, that's just being... That one's ignorant. Stupid is knowing and not doing. Anyway, the other one I like to put on here, a farmer's management ability is not on that soil test. And so that beautiful soil test and poor management, it never works. All right, now let's look at those soil tests. Taking action. First of all, what's your first action? Like I said, the first step in this biological farming thing is first understand it a little bit, and then the first step in this biological farming thing is to really change your thinking. To look at this thing and say to yourself, what does it take? What am I after? I want mineralized, balanced, healthy soils. What does that biology want? And if you can't figure it out on your 4,000 acres or your 4 acres, do it in your garden. If we're going to take action, the first thing we're going to do, remove the negatives. Not so complex. We didn't spend any money yet. Anyway, I got a list of negatives here. Salt fertilizers, too much nitrogen use, excess manure, excess fertilizer use, any material that causes the soil to get out of balance. Potassium chloride at over 100 pounds per acre gives you an excessive level of chloride in your soil. Did I say you couldn't use any? Well, I wouldn't recommend it unless it's too soluble. But it's excessive. Dolomitic lime, when you already get enough magnesium, is a mistake. You're giving something you already got too much of already. So you got to look at the sources to try to do what you're going to do. And I don't know how much time I get to get in the fertilizer industry here today. An imbalanced fertilizer, too much soluble fertilizer, anhydrous ammonia, herbicide overuse, insecticides, too much tillage, over-aeration, tillage at the wrong time. Bearing residues out of the aerobic zone, working the soils too wet. No tillage when the soil needs air and drainage. You went to no-till and you shouldn't have. Those are negatives. Now let's look at some positives. Let's do something right. Take a look at your soil test and remineralize and correct the deficiencies. That's a positive soil. That's a positive act. Use a balanced crop fertilizer consisting of all the essential minerals and a high-quality thing that's not going to burn the roots off a plant. Take a fertilizer that's got to balance the minerals. Using a 9-23-30 or an NPK fertilizer is a terrible mistake. It automatically sets you up for an imbalance, even if they weren't harsh materials. These materials are sold based on price, not performance. So a balance. Calcium, sulfur, boron, manganese, a complete balanced fertility. Can you do this in dry or liquid? You could do this in liquid, but the trouble with liquids is they're all soluble. Show me a slow-release liquid fertilizer. I want one right now. Show me it. Not available. Are none. Can't have. It's a soluble, kick-in-the-pants kind of stuff, but it's not a fertility program. Don't get that confused. It can be a starter, a jump, a push, but it's not a fertility program. It's not a fertility program. It's a kick. Whether it's a foliar or a starter, but a good balanced dry, soluble to slow release. If I want to compare that, and I guess you guys are probably saying, what is this? He keeps talking about that. If I want to just look at phosphorus, a soluble phosphorus is MAP or DAP. There might be a slow release phosphorus, Idaphos is the one we use, North Carolina Reactive Rock, Calphos, manure. These are stable. Phosphorus in the oat plant is a slow release. Potassium, soluble potassium is potassium chloride. Somewhat less soluble is potassium sulfate. Again, our green manure crops would be slow release. Green manure crops, green and livestock manure would be more slow release. Compost, and the list can go on. So you got to look at what soluble and slow release is. You got to use a little bit of soluble fertilizer as a starter fertilizer. Why is that? The ground is cold and wet and there's no biological activity when the soil temperature is 35 degrees and you still plant it anyway. You better use a soluble fertilizer because you aren't going to get any from the biology. In July, you shouldn't have to use a soluble fertilizer. The soils ought to be working plenty good, but you got to have a base for them to work off of, and you got to have something to feed the soil life. If you don't, keep on feeding it nutrients. We're in sand. You want to know what they do to get 200 bushel of corn on sand? Hang on. The list is a page long, and if something happens every week, you don't miss a week. You split the nitrogen out at least a half a dozen times. You side dress potassium when the corn is knee-high. You start with a phosphorus. You put on more phosphorus later. You make sure you got magnesium in the starter. You do balanced trace minerals. You foliar feed trace minerals. You put enzymes out there. You ready for this? We did not spend money to get that crop on sand, but we took care of it hydroponically because there was no biology. So anyway, the positive things got to create an ideal home, use deep tillage for drainage, and I'm not going to continue on anymore because I'm going to go to the case study. I already went through the case study. Let's go to the soil test. You can look at the actions. You get to this open page in the middle, and it's Midwestern BioAg. It's a model biological farm. How he thinks and what he does, I just threw that in there for some thoughts. That's a sheet I handed out before. On the left-hand side of that sheet, just as there is on the page, the front cover of the page of this thing, it says the rules to biological farming, and there's 6 of them. I have never seen anybody successful and violate all those rules. Test and balance the soils, feed the soil life, control air and water, manage decay of residues. They're just common sense kind of things out here. Well, let's go to our soil test because I know a lot of you got soil tests, and I want to talk about the fertilizers and the soil test out here. What I have here, is this stuff erased?
Here's the eraser.
Oh, I got 2 of them today. I guess they're disposables. If not, I got the wrong pen. Anyway, well, I'll draw that over here with a different pen. Can everybody see this kind of? What we have over here, I showed you that maps of that farm, and what I want to really show you is right now, if I draw that map, I got to show you why I did what I did. And I want to give you a little lesson about soil testing. And soil testing, there's someone, I believe, speaking about soil testing at this conference, and I hope to take that in because you see the test is no better than the sampling guy out here, and every lab is different. You've got to put it in its perspective. Don't get hung up on that soil test. Put it in its perspective. I like it when our daughter went to Chile, we went to a conference, and there was a doctor up there speaking, and he said, I spent 12 years trying to lower my blood cholesterol level. I just couldn't get it accomplished. I took all this other stuff, and he said, last year, I did something that cut it in half. You want to know what I did? I switched test labs. If you think I'm going back to that old test lab, you're absolutely crazy. And I think, there's some truth to that. So if you got problems with high blood cholesterol, just keep looking for new labs. Oh, it's terrible. Here's my 4 fields. I guess we got my 4 fields. What I did, and the reason I got to demonstrate this, because you'll be confused otherwise, in the beginning, because the buildings sit here, in the beginning, I had a clue in my mind, knowing farmers, that this half of the field probably got more manure. You think I was wrong? I mean, is that a good assumption? I've been around farmers a long time. It's cold out to get to that end of the field. The manure spreaders are empty long before they get there. So I said, this is field 1, that's field 2, that's field 3, that's field 4, and this is the pasture down here. Not a rocket scientist this thing out here. I got about 5 different soil types. If I truly want to do this, I probably should look at different soil types. Each field's 30 acres. If you have and want to be more elaborate on soil testing, I knew it was broke. More testing wasn't going to fix it. I wanted a clue as to how bad it was broke. Remember, it hasn't been aligned in 35 years. What would you expect? Low pHs, right? If you never use commercial fertilizers, that's not what happens. Organic farmers do not have acid soils. Once they get them neutral, they cannot acidify them again unless they use commercial fertilizers or a lot of manure. Soils don't get acid on their own, not with biology. Earthworms neutralize soil pHs. They neutralize them. So I did it I think the numbers are, if you look on that soil test on there, if you look at that test, on the first sheet I got 1A and 2A. So I called this field in the beginning A, and I went 1 and 2. And I called this one B, and I went 1 and 2. And I did that in the fall, although we didn't buy the farm until March. And the reason I did that was to see what it looked like. Now I walk out in the field, and I stand on the end of the field, and I say, what does the bulk of this field represent? If I'm not going to go in that little dip, I'm certainly not going to stand right here and take my sample because that's where we started the spreader. I'm going to get away from that. There's a waterway going through here, and I'm not going to get on that clay knoll. I'm going to stay at that sandy spot. If I'm going to sample those, I'm not going to mix them all. I'll just end up with an average. What good's an average? An average is one in a bucket of boiling water and one in ice water, and an average you're comfortable. And averages don't work. I wanted to see a pattern. So now notice what happened when I took these soil samples. Is there a big difference between the splitting those fields? What the difference is, if you go to 2A to 1A, you see maybe a lighter soil. Why did I say that? Is everybody in tune to where I am on this first page, 1A and 2A? Notice 1A has an organic matter of 2.4 and 2A has a 1.6. A little sandier. What would you expect these soils to look like? Well, I go down and I'll start looking across the sheet. Phosphorus levels. It says 24H. This is Midwest Labs, used to be A&L Lab out of Omaha. People really got confused about this. The A&L Lab in Omaha does not test the same as the A&L Lab in Indiana or Texas. They all use different procedures. So if you took a sample and split it out into all different A&L Labs, you get all different reports. Guy said, how can this be? They use different test methods. This is a DPA extraction reported on parts per million and a mild acid extraction. If you understand and know this test, what your testing is all about. If I switch labs next year, now I started this lab, I don't want to switch. I now have a benchmark. I have a barometer. This lab is going to test consistently. How I do it. I have sent these samples to Kinsey, and I will show you those in just a second. I split samples. If you look across the sheet, what would you expect? If we looked at phosphorus on this test out here, if you notice the phosphorus came back in the 20 range, 24s or so. We would like that level to be at 50 on the P1, and this is in parts per million. The university says 25. That's why if you notice behind that 24 on that 1A, it's got an H. That H doesn't stand for heavy. It says high, but not high enough. High on whose basis? You know how they did that? That's high enough. They did not see a yield response by adding more phosphorus when they had a zinc deficiency. Oh, well, we didn't look at zinc. You can't move your phosphorus up and leave zinc alone. Sorry, it does not work. You got to move them up. If you want to get your phosphorus higher, you got to move zinc. You'll have a zinc deficiency. Straightforward, that simple. So you got to keep these things in line. So if you're doing research on phosphorus and you add more phosphorus and things don't get better, you might have something else too short. You got to bring on balanced nutrition. The other thing is they were only measuring what? Yield. If you want to cut down on insects, what do you got to do, guys? You got to raise the energy level of the plant. How do you get energy? What's phosphorus do? Energy. That's why the guys that got iron and things are low on energy, and their livestock have breeding problems and everything else, and their cattle get thin because they don't have enough usable phosphorus. It's for energy. Energy transfer is phosphorus. We want that phosphorus level to be higher. Now, some of you guys are saying out here, Kerry Reams years ago kept talking about 400 pounds of phosphorus per acre. Well, let's look at Neil Kinsey's. On the back of that second page, is Neil in the room? If not, you're going to have to defend yourself one-on-one. No. Neil spoke at our conference a couple of years ago, and I used to be a Brookside consultant, and I was trying to get an idea how we could compare labs. So we split samples and sent them in this lab. First of all, you'll notice if we look at, these are fields 3 and 4. They're right on the back side. If you take a look at, it's kind of sad they're on one side. I had them printed here. 3 and 4 on the one side of this sheet, and Kinsey's is on the other side. Look at his phosphorus reading. 243 is the desired level on field number 3. 124 is what he found. What's similar about these tests? They're both short. They're low. Would you not expect that? I gave you the history. The guy never put any fertilizer on. They were short. That's why I didn't sample before I bought it out. I got cold feet. They were short. Both of us said they're short. That's all we needed from that lab, wasn't it? We wanted to know what the ratios were, what was short and what wasn't short. If I go through all these, it's kind of interesting. Neil, well, our question was, is the calcium and magnesium different from Kinsey's testing than A&L lab? Look at this. This is kind of interesting. On sample number 3, he had 58 calcium, base saturation. If you guys can't follow this all, you have to have a consultant point it out or somebody that understands these tests, because it's hard to go through all these in the limited time we have, because I want some questions yet. And if you'll notice that he had 58 on calcium and 35 on magnesium. If we go to sample number 3 from A&L lab, 58.6 on calcium and 29.8 on magnesium. Are they different? No. They're exactly the same, within reason. The next one's a little bit different. Someone said to me, can we change these things? Can we change these things? You saw my soil test. And if we go down through these samples, take 1 and 2 and number 3 out here, and I said you guys do your own comparison, we expected them to be low. There is some variations. The only field, on field number 3, look at potassium. It says 156 and very high. If you go to Kinsey's side of that report, it'll show you low. A&L lab made a mistake. That is not high. We knew it wasn't high. Kinsey's lab was right. A&L was wrong. Take these things with a grain of salt. In a retest, it was not 156. That was an error. Hey, people make mistakes. Don't spend $1 million on someone else's mistake, folks. That's why you take a few of them and you do it. How often do you sample? I now know where I am. I know I got a plan of where I'm going, and I'm going to measure how well I'm doing. You're going to find out something kind of interesting here. Are we going to put on 87.4 pounds of phosphorus per acre? I can't even spread it that good. Phosphorus. How much and when and how? I'm going to start putting it on. And when I'm going to mark myself along the way, when I got enough, I'm going to stop. And when I stop, the soil test level will probably keep going up, won't it? If I got the proper biology. That's why, if you look at samples number 3, there were some errors. But let's go down to samples. Most of them are showing low phosphorus, low potassium. What about the pHs? Did you notice that? 7, 6.8, 6.6, 6.8. 6.5, 6.8, 7.3. I was extremely disappointed when I got them back. I was hoping the pH would be low. You know why? If the pH was low, what would have happened to the magnesium? It would have been lower, hopefully. I got stuck with this 35% magnesium. I can add something, but boy, to suck it away is pretty difficult, isn't it? If we go down through there, we would realize that this is a real typical. My exchange capacities are 7s to 8s to 10, 11. Not a heavy soil. That's not 300 bushel corn ground, but it'll do it. It can grow 175 bushel corn from the soil, and the other 125, I'm going to add a balanced fertilizer in the row to get. Did you get that point? The soil has the capacity to produce so much. I don't care whose ground it is. What's sad out here is your heavy black ground has the potential to produce 300, and you get 100, and you still got to add fertilizer to do it. I work with some guys in western Minnesota that got this heavy ground out here, and you absolutely will not sell them P&K anymore. They get lousy yields, but they sure aren't going to pay for them. And it didn't do him any good. I told the guy, one guy out there, he had low pHs, a lot of nitrogen use, I had a lot of cattle. I said, let's see, 2 tons of high calcium lime every other year for the next 8 years, and then we'll talk again. This is a long, hard road he's on. Wish he'd have started 25 years ago. So you get a picture out here. Sulfur, low. Zinc, 2s, fairly low. Manganese and iron, they aren't quite so bad, in the 20s on the 3s and the 30s on the iron. And this test right here, they should be in a 1-to-1 ratio. I want to really point something out. If you look at Kinsey's again, let's look at the trace minerals. His things are reported different. What's common about this? What did his report say? We're terribly low on phosphorus, we're low on calcium, we got excessive magnesium, and we're low on potassium. Both labs said the exact same thing with different numbers. Don't miss that point. Now is where we get into trouble. Down below, boron, 0.33. I don't know how to interpret these because it's been so long. Iron, 450. Manganese, 70. Copper, 1.6. And zinc, 6.2. A totally different method of extraction. If you can't grasp that concept, ask Kinsey what this means. Don't ask me. I can't read that dumb thing. I'll read the next one. I'll read Midwest Labs. I used to read that Kinsey report, but I haven't for so long I forgot the numbers. Not being critical of Brookside. I tell you, when I was with Brookside, I have a tremendous respect for what they taught me. And all book papers I studied, I was the most confused consultant, and I asked more questions. And it was such a battle going on in Brookside that I didn't know who to believe. And what the trouble was, the young consultants were coming on and said, oh, that potassium chloride isn't so bad. If they go to putting on calcium and drop their anhydrous, and that's all they did. You know why? Because you couldn't get those other things. And the other thing that was real sad about that, we never talked about trace minerals. We never talked about trace minerals. The old-timers sat in that room and said, use potassium sulfate. You know what no one said to me? Get the biology going. You're doing this for the biological reasons. No one ever said that to me when I was a Brookside consultant. And I quit them because I couldn't figure this thing out, and they were confused amongst themselves. This is a true story. It was not their fault. It was my fault for lack of understanding. And all these guys, someone wasn't directing that mind thought. Albrecht is long gone by the time I got there. And I understand there's some real changing in there. I'm disappointed in what some Brookside consultants do today. They're not all the same, just like our consultants are not all the same. But take a look at this report. There must be some reason you tested those trace minerals. I don't know how to read that. If you go to Midwest Labs, you'll notice zinc is in the 2s and 3s. We would like that to be 5. If you go to our booth and you want more exact numbers, if you stop at our booth, there's a book there that interprets this soil report that some of these guys are gladly to share the information with you at our booth. Like I said, we like to see the sulfur level. Like I said, it's sulfur. You got to realize something else out here about these numbers. Potassium is positive. Magnesium is positive. Calcium is positive. Sulfur is negative. Nitrogen is negative. All these others are positive. All the positive elements will hang on to a soil colloid. What do the negatives do? Leach. If you want to get rid of magnesium, what do you do? Add sulfur, because it leaches out magnesium. You have a hard time. If you have a real high buildup of sulfur and you haven't added any, you got a hard pan or poor draining soil. Straightforward, that simple. Or you got an 8% organic matter, because they calculate these things off of organic matter. Understand what that number is, and before you buy it, make sure you need it. And if you need to have more evidence, you're not comfortable, do some tissue testing, do some digging, do some looking. Get some feed tests. You notice which element leaches out the first? Nitrogen. Which one holds a little better? Sulfur. Boron doesn't go down. Which other negative element we got? Phosphorus. Does phosphorus leach out of a soil? Absolutely not. It does. When these guys talk about polluting our lakes and streams with phosphorus, that is not leaching. They're talking about erosion. Surface erosion. Non-point surface erosion. You know why? That's because it does not leach. You know why? Triple negative charge. You hook that triple negative charge with that triple positive charge on iron, and you don't have a big enough root to suck them apart. An earthworm or a bacteria or a termite might do it, but there's no crop root can get that any longer. That's why high iron is such a problem. Somebody should have really noticed that my scribbling is not readable. This is in a annual book from when I used to teach. They took a picture of the blackboard one day when I got done, and they put it in the annual because it was non-readable. This is the teacher, they said. I tried. Anyway, I'm not used to, I usually use these little boards, and the reason I'm not is the guys in the back can't see that, and you're supposed to see that, but that's not helping, is it? Anyway, I guess I just wanted to point out this thing has also got charges, and that's where this iron thing is a problem. I would rather place, if you put enough calcium on good biological activity. See, that's why this thing is, they are electromagnetic. They are charges. So we go out here on the soil test. I can't build sulfur real well. Phosphorus won't leach. Now, if we go to the next soil report, the last one that's in here, the last page is 1995. 1 year ago, I resampled all 4 fields. And because I was going to go and break this virgin soil, I took a soil sample of that pasture. That's this soil right here in this pail is the pasture. That's pasture on this test. Well, let's look at those. I know it might take a lot of flipping, but if you go from soil number 1, let's look at the changes we made in here. First of all, I shut that off. You can't see it anyway. And the second thing is that it might take a little flipping or pull that last sheet off or whatever you want to do. I don't have a problem with that. You can do what you want with this. I am a teacher by trade, and I always say to the guys, they said, can I have those sheets? I said, absolutely. If you promise to read them, you can have them. If you don't want to read them, they cost us money to print, then leave them at the door as you exit. That's fair, isn't it? Samples number 1. Look what we did to the phosphorus. First of all, now 1 is now a combination of 1A and 2A, and so we got a kind of an average. We just about doubled the phosphorus straight across that farm, didn't we? The field number 2 and 3, I didn't get my major soil corrections on yet, but I'm working on it. It's going to get corrected before I get to it. You know, I put 500 pounds of Idofos on number 1. I didn't get that done to 2, and I got it done to 4 and 1. I done 4 and 1, the major corrections. 3 is going to be done this year. Right now, some things are already on it. And then number 2 is left. 4 and 1 are done. 4 was done after this report. The only one that was done before this report was number 1. All of it only got a light coat of chicken manure once before these tests were taken. Why did phosphorus levels double? So all I had to do was grow rye crop once. 1 green manure crop. Stimulate that biology. Just 1 hit into my biology, and I changed that without adding it. I might not have had to add the Idofos, but I wanted to remineralize that soil, and I'm not opposed to that. I would love to see those numbers. If you notice one thing, interesting on number 1, look at the reserve phosphorus. P2, the 84, that's my reserve. See how much higher that is than the rest? Remember, the university told you that Idofos was a non-available phosphorus source. You only got 2% available. How did I do this in 2 years, in 1 year? How did this happen? Biology, biology, biology. What they failed to understand and put in their formula. Look at the potassium levels. They didn't do a lot. Notice number 4. Remember, or was that number 3 that was real high the first time they tested it? Now look where it's at. See, the first test was a mistake. Number 3 was a mistake the last time. It's not high, it's low. Well, now something's interesting about this. Let's go to the calcium and the magnesium on the right-hand side. Notice in my first test, the magnesium levels were 32 and 32.9 and 32.2. Now it's 27.9. I can reduce magnesium, can't I? If this was your farm and you bought it and the guy said, boy, I really did you a favor. 2 years ago, I put 5 tons of dolomitic lime on every acre. I really helped you. Would have my magnesium level dropped? Absolutely not. I've now got a 5-year supply that I'll live a little bit longer before I get rid of. He did me an advantage by never liming. It wasn't even acid, the soil wasn't. I'll never have a pH problem here, but I added, remember my formula's on another page, 1.5 tons of high calcium lime, 1,500 pounds of biocal. I added a dose of calcium, and now I've been adding chicken manure and more biocal. I'm never going to do high calcium lime again. 1 shot, 1-time deal. You probably don't need to do that. Remember, high calcium lime only gives you 2 pounds of calcium per ton of soluble calcium. You're doing that to raise your pH, and in this case, I'm trying to flood that soil with minerals. I'm remineralizing it. I'm throwing out my rock dust, if you want to call it that. I'm saturating that ground with minerals that have been depleted out of it. I'll never, ever add high calcium lime again, but I will add the biocal because I need some soluble calcium. I didn't have to add the biocal. I'm trying to speed this up. I didn't want to add more biocal because of the cost, and I didn't want more soluble calcium. I wanted some good base calcium. But look what I did to the calcium level. I took it from 65 to 69. 65 to 69, and that's after, actually it was tested in the fall of 93, a 94 crop season, and then I had 2 years in there, 94 and the 95 crop season, right? 2 crop seasons I had in there before I retested. 2 years. Now also look down below my major corrections. See, you could say, oh man, you didn't do a whole lot with zinc yet. I know, I didn't move it much. I put 5 pounds of zinc out there, and I now also, on my other things out there, those fields I haven't corrected, I've been using a lot of balanced row fertilizers. And once I get the soil corrected, I'll back off my fertilizer. Does that make sense? Once this thing is corrected, I'll use fertilizers, nothing more than a starter, in getting it going and based on what I want for a crop. Now, if I want 250 bushel, people come to my farm and they said, boy, you use a lot of fertilizer. And I said, yes, and I want twice the yield that you get. If I only wanted to get what these guys have been getting, I sure wouldn't use much fertilizer. Why would I? This land will produce 150 bushel corn, sticking seeds in the ground when I got this thing fixed, if I keep biology going. But I don't want 150 bushel corn. I want 250 bushel corn. Field number 1 is going to be entered in the National Corn Growing Contest next year. I'm not quite ready, but I'm going to get my feet wet in that contest because I want to enter, I want to show people that they can grow crops on organic certified farms and get good yields. I had 180 bushel corn this year. If I do that next year, in comparison, I will rank alongside of anybody in that contest in the state of Wisconsin. And that's on an organic certified farm. And I'm not trying to be smart about that. I'm just trying to put things in their perspective. I'm tired of the bad mouthing that people are giving the organic and a lack of understanding and knowledge of what this thing is all about. And that's why I farm. Not because I didn't have enough child abuse. I had my share. No. My parents are good, strict Germans. I know what a whip is. Didn't hurt me either. Oh, it did too. Anyway, off of that subject, let's look at the trace minerals and things down there. You notice, as an overall, if you look at the zinc, I have moved the trace minerals up. If you look at manganese, look at number 1 is only 16. Now you got to look at manganese as something else. Don't get hung up on manganese. When I was working with Orville Redenbacher Farms before Beecher's Food sold to ConAgra, that was in the old days, we were going to change how they grew popcorn until ConAgra bought it out from Beecher's Foods. Anyway, Purdue kind of was unhappy that I was putting manganese on soils at above a 7 pH. I want to show you, they said there's no way you can get any available manganese unless you got an acid soil. The only clue, I told you one time earlier, no one raised your hand and screamed and hollered, the only way this soil test does not measure biological activity, and that is not quite a correct statement. Iron levels are oxidizing and rusting. Manganese only can increase by biological activity or acidity. If you got a low pH, you have high manganese. If you got a 7 pH and your manganese level on a Midwest lab with a DPTA extraction increases, you have increased biological activity. And when we caught on to this was in 1988. The year of the drought, everybody's soil test took a drop in manganese. And the following year, everybody's manganese went off the charts. I said, now what happened? And then I started comparing and looking. It's a direct relationship to biological activity. As manganese comes up, it cannot come high. Purdue is not wrong. Manganese cannot increase at a pH of 7 without biological activity. And so when you look at these, now you can say, well, what happened to number 1? I put all that corrective on. Look at the crop I grew, when I tilled it, what the tillage cycle is. You got to throw all that information in. Just don't jump to these numbers. If you took these samples after a dry period or after it rained, when you want to do your microbiological studies is in May and in September, not in the middle of a drought. Count earthworms in May and September. Don't look for them in August. I've tried that. Remember. Look at now, if you look at number, see the best biological activity on this farm right now is field number 3. That was the poor soybeans I grew this year. But at that moment when I took this test, based on the residue cycles, that was probably right after I put some rye down. And you see, it's almost a 1-to-1 ratio. But if you go back and look at my ratios, they weren't awful in the beginning. You got to remember something. That guy plowed, he dug, he disked, he tilled the ground to death. There wasn't an earthworm on that farm. Not from chemicals, not from commercial fertilizers. He didn't have all of these negatives. He was probably over here. You know what his biggest limiting factor was? No minerals and lousy tillage practices. He had a grandpa or father-in-law that was bored and liked to drive tractor. Disc it. Dig it tomorrow. Rotary hoe it. Cultivate it one more time. Go for it. And you see, he destroyed it with tillage. And that's why every no-till guy knows if you don't have earthworms, you don't succeed. And so you should really get your soil biologically balanced and then go organic. Don't ever take a soil like I did and try to go organic. It's absolutely insane. Unless you know where you're going and what you're doing. And then it's still insane. But anyway, you tell the guys, get it biologically balanced and healthy. I was willing to take a yield hit. But you see, that's another clue on your soil test. If you notice my ratios in the beginning, a lot of the manganese levels have come up. Well, field 2 and 3 certainly did. And iron levels, usually those ratios are 1 to 1. Notice the copper. I certainly doubled my copper just about, didn't I? And boron didn't move a lot, but boron won't move. If I increase the boron levels of my soil, I probably could back down an application, or else I'm following a dry period. Boron's an anion and a leach. I'd like my boron levels to be 2. I'd like my copper levels in chili, they're 10. And they get 5. I want to control white mold in soybeans. I think funguses and mold are controlled by copper balances. See, chili's got 10 parts per million on that test right there from that lab on copper. And we shoot for 2. I saw beautiful crops for 10. So where do we need to be at? It's a lot of questions. Whew. Some of you guys are new at this and haven't heard me speak before. I'm from a little town in Spring Green, Wisconsin, and I bowl with this guy, Jerry. And we were bowling years ago. I used to bowl when I had time. Now you got to be home to bowl. I figured that was kind of fun. And we were bowling one night. We got talking about what I did for a living, and he said, I said, biological farming, and he kind of had a blank look on his face. I said, hey, well, I got a meeting in Mount Horeb next week. Why don't you come and listen, and you'll learn about this. And he sat kind of in the back of the room and kind of sat with a blank look at the whole meeting. No expression, no nothing. Next time we went bowling, I said, Jerry, I said, what did you think? You sat back there and you listened to that whole thing. What do you think about that? And he said, I don't know. He said, it was like kind of standing behind the manure spreader. It was really coming, but most of it missed me. And so, if you feel like that, you're not alone. These dairy farmers got crazy minds, don't they? So, I think she's unloaded. And I hope I got some things to think about. I appreciate your attention. And I said, we don't have all the answers. I wanted to go through the case example to show you where this is at. I hope you got some concept about how to approach biological farming. If you're happy being here, then figure out where you're at and don't cut your fertilizer in half. If you want to cut your fertilizer down and use less inputs, move over. If you don't want to move at all, keep doing this. You keep doing what you've been doing, and you keep getting what you've been getting. It's real straightforward, that simple. And you can better not cut any fertilizer things. But it's real easy to move a little bit. Go to balanced fertilizer. Now you moved right to here, right now. How hard was that? No pain, nothing about that. So, I have 15 minutes for questions, and I will gladly take those if anybody's got some. Yes, sir?
Can we use copper sulfate for copper?
Yes, talking about sources. What we did on this farm, I listed the sources. What I do as a fertilizer, I'm not saying they're right. In our fertilizer industry, we use ammonium sulfate, we use MAP, we use potassium sulfate as our soluble sources. We use Idaho phosphate. We use North Carolina rock phosphate, and we make a trace mineral mix we homogenize with North Carolina rock. So I look at the fertilizer industry a little different than other people do. In the fertilizer, I want to balance the soluble to slow. I want to control the pH. I put a fertilizer down in that row. I like that pH to be in the mid-5s. You know why? The nutrients stay available longer. My soils are 7. This is additional to my soils. And then I also like to get a balance. I want to balance all those things in here. And I want to put something on that's not going to burn those roots off. And I don't know what those things are. So as an industry, as what we do, if I'm organic, I use copper sulfate, zinc sulfate. See, there's no mineral in the organic I can't use. There's just some sources I can't use. So we use the sulfate forms of copper. I use calcium borate, which is kind of interesting. I think it comes from Turkey. And it's kind of interesting. Everybody says, oh, you put boron in, you'll damage seedlings. That's if you use sodium borate. Calcium borate doesn't do that. Never figured, I put on a lot of boron to try to kill seeds, and I can't do it. If you put boron in the presence of calcium, you can't kill anything. If you do it without calcium, you probably can. And you got to look at all these relationships. So we check our sources and select them for different reasons. But yes, I use the sulfate forms. On our conventional fertilizer, I take that North Carolina rock and we make a homogenized trace mineral mix. I can't do that with organic. I cannot take an organic fertilizer and lower the pH. Most of the fertilizers and things we handle are not organic. So you said to me, is copper oxide an okay source? What about the chelates? Well, the oxides are so slow release that they're a slow release. You want to put zinc oxide out there, you didn't do it for 96. You did it for 97 if you put it out there last spring. Unless you got tons of biology. So on chelates, why are you using a chelate? Because you're full, you're feeding? That's probably why. So a sulfate seems to be the best choice. I'm not saying some of these other things are awful, but that's my reasoning behind that. Yes?
Explain to me why you're putting the rye after the bean stubble and not rye after the corn stalks.
Why not the rye after corn stalks is the question. Why after the bean stubble is because I would interseed my soybeans with clover because I'm going to follow that with corn, right? That would make sense to most people. Except I got that guy up there in the central sands, he takes his soybeans and he bulk spreads clover. Now, if you're a soybean farmer and you use a chemical called Pursuit, red clover loves Pursuit. It grows, flourishes in Pursuit. But the trouble is, when those beans are ready to combine and my clover is this tall, I am not going to recommend that to anybody. I don't like those phone calls. I have to. So I don't want to interseed in my beans. So I put in rye after the beans. First of all, I figure you don't need to till rye in. Just take a fertilizer buggy and bulk spread it, and it seems to fit. Everybody says, well, you're putting a grass with a grass. First of all is this. Rye at this tall is 20 to 24% protein. It's gone in 10 days after I put it in the soil. If it gets tall, it becomes a straw and robs nitrogen. Nitrogen and protein is a correlation. If you want to figure out how much nitrogen is in a plant, you divide the protein by 6.25. So the nitrogen level, if it's a 20% protein, it has got a beautiful nitrogen to carbon ratio, and it doesn't matter if it's a legume or a grass. It'll dissolve instantly. If that got away from me and got real big, I would bind up nitrogen. But remember, I'm going to take my roll cleaners and throw it out of the way. And on the plant where it's not. I would not want to plant in that tall stuff. So it fits my farm and my rotation. Now on the corn planter, I don't want to put a grass in my growing corn. I interseed that at last cultivation. I got to have shade-tolerant plants. Rye grain is not shade-tolerant. Rye grass, red clover, oilseed radish, vetch is what I interseed my corn with. So that fits my plan. I'm not saying there's not other plants. There certainly can be. That fits my rotation. That's why guys grow wheat. Put clover with your fertilizer in the spring and wheat. It's a wonderful practice. Yes?
I noticed that in your fourth field and your pasture, your cation exchange capacity came up between the two samples. How did you do that?
Sampling air.
Okay, that should
No. Cation exchange capacity, yes. And the cation exchange capacity, by the way, in our book that we got that I followed up on the farms, after 10 years, I'm convinced I'll raise the organic matter, true organic matter, not residue left out there because of bad decay, 1%, and I will raise my exchange capacity by 25%. I work with farms that we went from 9 to 12 on exchange capacity. How do you raise exchange capacity? Humus. I did not have enough time to build humus yet, so this is probably sampling air. These are a grain of salt. But you can raise your exchange capacity. I will have all these soils in the 12 range within 10 years. That's because I'm going to build the humus. Look at that pasture. Glad you brought that up. I didn't talk about that pasture. Look at what the phosphorus is. The best field of soybeans I ever stood in my life grows on this soil with a 5 on phosphorus. Now, they were shoulder high when they went totally flat. That's not my fault. That's the 2 inches of rain, and I shouldn't have planted beans on that virgin soil. Oh, were they beautiful. You couldn't walk through them. And I planted those beans the same time I planted the beans on field 3 where I had the pour stand and all the weed pressure. And I got a pour stand because we got this hard packing rain, and I rotary hoed them out. Every bean in those bottoms of that virgin soil grew. And they got this tall before they went flat. 5 on phosphorus, potassium 80. Exchange capacity was 13. Organic matter 3.3. Look at the zinc. Interesting. I got some farmers out in this national corn growing thing. That's why I talk about it. I got a farmer that follows this. Every top corn producer in the United States of America, he sat down with dinner with every one of them, and they all have zinc in the area of 10 on their soil tests. None of them do that with low zinc levels. Just a thought, just a thought. Now, if you raise zinc without phosphorus, you made a mistake. Why is my pasture has never, ever, ever got a pound of fertilizer on the history of this earth that we can remember? If it did, it got it done back in the 1800s. This is a third-generation farm I bought. Never a pound of fertilizer. The gate was open in the spring and cattle were turned in the fall. They were driven back out. And it was chewed down to stubble. Where did all that zinc come from? Got a lot of iron. I got a pretty good copper level. Quite different. That's virgin soil. So, yes?
I was told that I shouldn't plant soybeans after alfalfa. Why is that?
Anybody? Why can't we plant soybeans after alfalfa? I love doing it. Now, I don't do it on old stands of alfalfa. Actually, in the rotavator booth over here, this guy, Clarkston Grain, is wanting to buy a lot of organic beans, and they want people to take their CRP land and put them into soybeans. I take that, you got to remember my rotation's fairly tight. I don't get a gigantic, huge alfalfa rut. I don't know of any negative reason to growing beans after alfalfa. I've been pretty successful. But it's not old alfalfa. Yes, sir?
When you mentioned green crop, green manures, cutting them too short, you're just getting sugars and wait for them to go later, then you get the fiber.
Yes.
How do you know for all green manures in a sense when it starts turning, going to seed or brown?
It would based on its maturity. Until it starts to flower or seed, just like alfalfa, until it starts to seed, it's in a vegetative growth. Once it stops vegetative, once it turns that cycle and goes to seed, now it's putting lignin or complex carbohydrates down. And then the protein's dropping, which means nitrogen's dropping, fiber's increasing, and the complexity of the fibers are increasing, and now it's flipping the other direction. And that's why on rye, I want to go about 8 inches on rye. I want to use rye as a biological stimulant, trapping my minerals and to give a big surge of nutrients out here at that early season. Whereas, like I said, if I want to build organic matter, I got corn stalks, or I'd let that, I told the guys out here that Carmen Fernholz from Madison, Minnesota, has got a nice little book out here, and he says, to build organic matter, the fastest in the soil is Sudan grass and sweet clover. You have to plant them both together in the spring if you want to leave land lay fallow to build land. I'm not opposed to doing that. You know what? I said to the guys out here, I'm better off if I'd have taken a year off on that farm and put the fertilizers out there, put the green manure crops, took 1 year off. Instead of taking half a crop for 5 years while I fixed it, why not fix it in 1 year and then take a full crop from then on? So if you did that and took their Sudan grass out, Sudan grass is interesting. University of Wisconsin says that if you plant Sudan grass in the sand, it controls nematodes. Huh? Are you confused yet? You know why? It's a potassium sucker. And it sucks all the potassium out of the soil. And a nematode problem is usually a potassium-calcium ratio. And on sand, that's a real severe problem. We have a lot of disease and insect problems on sand because in order to grow a crop on sand, you automatically, up front, got to create an imbalance. So you can't do it. You can't have a balanced soil on sand. And so when they grew that Sudan grass, it sucked all the potassium and so the nematode problem went away. But they thought that Sudan grass and sweet clover are real fibrous, aggressive, big plants and will build a lot of carbon in your soil. Yes?
How do you put your clover out in the corn?
How do I put what?
The clover.
Oh, how do I do the clover? On my cultivator, I have a Gandy seeder. Now, I have used a 3-point Whirly seeder. I've got one now that's driven on a little electric motor. We're actually working with Gandy, and we're trying to develop a seeder. I had some guys out here that's it's on an electric motor, and I'm kind of into this technology stuff because I'm kind of I don't want to remember to have to turn it on all the time. So I want, like Buffalo's got on their electronic guidance system, that little mercury switch. When my cultivator comes up, it shuts off the motor. Now, that's not real complex. That's kind of simple to bolt on there. And I got a little electric motor. And when I drop that down, I want that to start up and dribble it out. And I like to do a band, but I've used Whirly seeders, and I've got a Vicon seeder. The only reason, the advantage of the band is I probably could use less seed, and I don't need to put it all over, and I would save a few dollars there, but I don't mind bulk spreading it, but I don't want to make any more trips. Get the job done while you're out there and what you're already doing. Don't make more work for yourself. I learned something about farmers a long time ago. If you got enough work right now, don't give them more.
Okay, you got your green manure sitting there, and you're wanting to get it into your soil, right? What tool do you use to do that?
My Howard rotavator. I like to till it in shallow. Now, you could use any tool that you can incorporate that shallow. The rotavator has the advantage it's the most aggressive against weeds. Now, if you use herbicides, that may not be totally essential. There are aeration tools out here, but I want to incorporate it, so a rotavator, I only go about yay deep with that rotavator. Shallow as I can go and get the job done. And I chop it up and mix it in shallow.
You've been talking always about the northern regions. How about the southern region, like California, Oregon?
Is that in America? He's talking about the northern region. He asked me about the southern region. I'm really convinced the principles don't matter where I'm standing. These principles are real and true and solid. I can't give you a formula. It's what I can't do. But you get me to California, or not me, somebody out there that understands this thing, and there's got to be somebody successful who knows this thing in California. Either if you lay this out with common sense, what I talked about here, and put it in its perspective, and say, where are you in this thing? And there's guys that have figured this out in California. Some guys by accident. Some guys because they had no money and they couldn't buy these things. There was real ways of getting this thing figured out, I'm convinced. That's what you did. No money, and see, it was not by accident. Someone planned that for you.
You commented against fall application of phosphorus for the map.
Well, I'm saying that's not a very good buy. If it ties up in 2 hours on it, and if you got a lot of biology in the soil, that source of fertilizer right there, it must mean you got too much money if you're using it. No, I don't know. If I put it on and in 2 hours it's all tied up and it became part of the 5,000 pounds out there, I'm confused why I would buy it. I would rather, now I know guys use soluble phosphorus, I would rather, if I were to make a phosphorus correction, I would rather use a natural soil release phosphate. I will then feed my crop a good source of liquid or dry, which is MAP, or a ortho or a polyphosphate. I would feed that in the zone. You see, phosphorus doesn't move in the soil, so I got to use it as a starter. Phosphorus is the #1 critical thing to put in that row, along with a balance of everything. But I need phosphorus. I don't care what your soil tests say, because the roots are out there. There's no biology, and I got to concentrate the phosphorus to grow roots. And then I would not. So that's why. Why would I bulk spread it in the fall? I just don't like that source.
Side dressing. Phosphorus. You see much of that?
If I want to build phosphorus in the soil, see the phosphorus. I'm not side dressing. Now I have this year on our corn. We've been manufacturing a nitrogen source called, it's a byproduct. It's called 18,6,1,1,1,1,1. All these are ones that are because it's a soybean product, and what that is, there's 6 phosphorus in there, and maybe there's a place and a merit for late phosphorus. We're looking at corn and beans. On potatoes, I'm really convinced of something on potatoes, and that is that they can't utilize phosphorus very well. And to go out on a potato field, I followed these potato guys so long, I actually cracked up laughing in front of someone I shouldn't have, because he said, I'm really convinced that you're wrong on phosphorus, because he said, we've been getting plenty of phosphorus uptake in the plant. The reason I laughed was because I was talking about, here's how we put fertilizers on potatoes. The potatoes are planted here, and they side dress on both sides of the road in a slot. I want to band it. You know why? They can't get it. They can't get it. The new growth root on potatoes is the only one that feeds. So you got your fertilizer here, and after the new growth, now you put all this salt here, and the new roots won't even go near it. But the reason they got good phosphorus uptake, they put on 7 times more than they needed. So, I can take one more question. Yes, sir.
What herbicides do to the soil life?
I would love to answer. What do herbicides do to soil life is the question. If we knew, we probably wouldn't use them. Now, Dr. Elaine Ingham out in Oregon says atrazine was a far better bactericide than it ever was a herbicide. But we never looked. I'm not saying herbicides are all awful and bad. I go to more contact herbicides, and with good biological activity, they probably break down. Somebody asked me last year, are you against herbicides? Why won't you use them? And I said, because I don't want to put any yield-limiting factors on my crop. Herbicides are yield-limiting factors. It's so simple to farm without them. Corn's a piece of cake. Soybeans are a challenge. And, once your soils are better, it's not necessary. And that's the reason why I said if you got too many acres and you insist upon you got to constantly use herbicides, let's talk about how much money we make per acre. Let's cut our acres in half and make more money, and then we don't need all these acres, and I don't have to use the herbicides. Anyway, that's personal opinions. I'm sorry. I'll be at it. With that note, I will close, and I thank you all for coming.
Thank you for listening to the Acres USA podcast, a podcast production of Acres USA. Find us on Spotify, Apple, Google Play, and other popular podcast platforms. Acres USA is North America's oldest publisher on production-scale organic and regenerative farming. For more than 50 years, our mission has been to help farmers, ranchers, and market gardeners grow food profitably, regeneratively, and with nature in mind. Find our books and other Acres USA media and learn about Acres USA events at acresusa.com. Read our online magazine at members.acresusa.com, and we'd like to thank Acres USA staff for their contributions to producing this podcast. This episode was edited and engineered by Weston Larson of Acres USA. And we're grateful to our guests for taking the time to talk with us about their experiences.